That same day, Odabar, Lair estate. The Odabar was usually a low, quiet kind of place. Warm fire, soft laughs, the clink of mugs. But that calm shattered when a chair scraped violently across the floor. The sound was like nails on stone. Laughter died. Conversations snapped shut. For a heartbeat, the entire hall went silent. Two traveling merchants near the fireplace exchanged tight, uneasy glances. The waiter didn't even look up. He didn't need to. Everyone in Odabar knew what that noise meant. The back room was for private meetings, and not the friendly kind. It belonged to the dangerous ones, the people you didn't ask questions about if you wanted to keep breathing. A regular at the counter leaned back and muttered, just loud enough for the closest tables to hear, "Another poor fool finding out what happens when you cross the wrong crowd." Nobody answered. They just turned back to their drinks like nothing had happened. Behind the backroom door, three figures stood over a man strapped to a metal chair. He was barely recognizable as human. Clothes torn and soaked red. One eye swollen shut. Sweat ran down his face in steady rivers, and every breath came out ragged, like he was dragging air through broken ribs. Professor Trenith, Arcadia instructor, infamous for his cold-blooded interrogations, slammed a fist into the wooden table beside him. "Talk," he said, voice low and edged with fury. "What's your link to the assassins in Blackroot Forest?" The captive flinched at the impact, but stayed silent, eyes down, jaw clenched tight. Professor Grinder Voss stepped forward, his voice rough as gravel. "We know who you are. Playing dumb won't save you." Still nothing. The man shifted against the restraints, trembling hard enough to make the chair rattle. Then Professor Barlow leaned in. Barlow didn't shout. He didn't need to. He crouched beside the captive and spoke quietly, the way a blade speaks right before it goes in. "You're protecting someone. I get that." His eyes didn't blink. "But ask yourself, would they protect you?" He paused, letting the words sink in. "Who sent them? Who gave the order? What's your connection to that group?" Silence. Trenith slammed the table again. "Who leads them?" The man finally lifted his head. His gaze was hollow, broken, as if something inside him had already died. "If I tell you," he rasped, barely louder than breath, "they'll kill my family." Barlow straightened slowly. His face stayed unreadable. "They won't spare you either. But we might." The captive swallowed hard. "I made a mistake," he whispered, more to himself than to them. "But I won't make another. If I die here," he added shakily, "you're declaring war on people stronger than all of you." Then his jaw clamped down, so suddenly the sound of something cracking echoed inside his mouth. A choking gasp followed. His body jerked forward. Foam bubbled at his lips. His eyes rolled back. Within seconds, he went limp, sagging against the restraints, dead weight in the chair. The air filled with a sharp, bitter stench. Poison. Grinder cursed under his breath. "Damn it." Capsule hidden in his cheek. Barlow looked down at the body, expression hardening. They threatened him enough that dying was safer than talking. Trenith turned away and punched the stone wall. A crack spread from his knuckles. "We were this close. And now we've got nothing. No papers. No symbols. No identity marks. Whoever was behind the assassination attempt had erased every trail. And this lead was gone. Whoever did this isn't just hiding," Barlow said grimly. "They're organized. They're confident. And they might be watching us right now." He glanced toward the door. "We leave. Now." Meanwhile, the other side of the terminal, base of Frostvale Mountain. After the teleportation from Arcadia, the first years didn't arrive in one place. We were split across 3 different terminals at the foot of Frostvale Mountain. The air here was thin and biting. Pines groaned under cold wind. The scent of ice and moss clung to every breath. Each group gathered at a different stretch of rugged mountainside, where narrow trails climbed toward 3 hidden entrances carved into the rock. Professors Kaldin, Elysia, and Sylvia gave short instructions, then led their teams up. The climb was brutal. Frostvale was steep, jagged, and unforgiving. Loose stone rolled underfoot, and the wind cut through armor like it was cloth. Top-ranked students like Jean, Elysia, and Edwin moved fast, reaching their entrance in under 30 minutes. Their pace was confident, almost casual. Kale and Cecilia stayed near the back of Group 2, moving steadily. Kale's face looked calm, but his eyes kept sliding across the shadows and the tree-line. He wasn't only watching for danger. He was thinking about what this event meant, about what was supposed to happen here. At last, all three groups reached their assigned gates. Group 1 stood before a massive stone opening shaped like a beast's mouth, the maw of silent echoes. Group 2 reached a narrow passage half hidden in mist. The carved name above it read, Veil Shroud Gate. The air here felt colder, heavier, like secrets were buried in the stone. Group 3 faced a cracked, ancient archway, jagged and missing chunks, but still standing. The broken seal cavern. Beside each gate sat a carved stone well. Deep into the rock, an inscription had been cut, words left by the founders of this trial. Every student paused to read. This is the Dungeon of Trials, forged for the students of Elysia State. Crafted in the Forgotten Era by Asris Valen, third generation of the great Valen lineage. Those who enter with purpose know this. Glory is not given, it is earned. The words hit the crowd hard. Kale stared at the engraving longer than most. Asris Valen. I've seen that name before. Cecilia glanced over. You okay? Kale nodded without looking away. Yeah, just thinking. With the teams settled, the professors stepped forward. Professor Elysia stood before her group, posture straight, voice smooth but firm. Listen carefully. She gestured to the inscription. This dungeon wasn't built by ordinary hands. It was created centuries ago by Asris Valen, a legendary figure of the Valen bloodline. Some students looked startled. Others leaned closer. Asris Valen is the third-generation ancestor of our principal, Aldrich Valen, she continued. He lived in the Forgotten Era, when the world was chaos, war, and ancient beasts. She let that breathe for a second. But he wasn't only a leader. He was a sword master, ranked 45th among all swordsmen in the world during his time. Her gaze sharpened. Out of millions, top 50. Whispers spread. Students stared at the stone with new weight on their faces. He believed power without purpose was worthless, Elysia said. So he built these trials, not to reward talent, but to forge strength through experience, strength meant to one day stand against the demon lord. She looked across the group. So when you walk in there, remember, you're stepping into a legacy. This isn't a game. This is a path carved by one of the greatest warriors in history. Walk it like you mean it. Kale stood near the back, mind racing. So the dungeon's founder is the principal's ancestor and one of the strongest swordsmen ever. His thoughts churned faster than the mountain wind. And ahead of him, the gate waited. Group 1, Maw of Silent Echoes. A thin wind wailed around the dungeon's narrow mouth. The entrance everyone had already started calling the Maw of Silent Echoes. Inside, the cave swallowed light almost instantly. The walls were rough, slick with cold, and wrapped in shadows so deep they looked solid. The silence was worse. It wasn't the normal quiet of a place with no people. It was the kind that made every breath feel like a mistake. Group 1, 47 first years, clustered at the entrance. Elysia stood at the front, expression set, hand resting on her sword. Let's move, she said. No hesitation. The line started forward. Step by step, the daylight behind them shrank into a pale dot, then vanished. The stone grew colder. Moisture slid down the ceiling in slow drops. Soon the tunnel was nothing but darkness and the sound of boots on rock. Whispers started to creep through the group. It's too dark. I can't see. Where are we going? Did the professor even mention this? The deeper they went, the heavier the quiet became. Every little sound, footsteps, a swallow, the rustle of cloth, echoed back at them from weird angles. It felt like the cave was replaying their own noises just to mess with them. Students at the back began to lag. Hands tightened on sword grips. Eyes kept snapping to the sides, to the ceiling, to the shadows that shouldn't have been moving. This place gives me the creeps, someone muttered. From the rear, Professor Calden finally spoke, calm as ever. Use your firelight stones. One by one, small orange flares bloomed. The tunnel didn't brighten much, but it became visible enough to stop everyone from walking blind. Flickering light threw long, warped shadows across the walls. Elysia didn't slow down. She kept scanning every crack and bend like she expected something to jump out any second. "She's really locked in," someone whispered. "She always is," another answered. For Elysia, this wasn't just a pass or fail trial. She needed strength. She needed results. And she wasn't letting this group fall apart on her watch. The tunnel narrowed, then twisted again. Shadows started to shift in the firelight like they had a life of their own. A cold draft brushed their ankles, even though there was no opening anywhere. Elysia led the way, jaw tight, eyes sharp. Behind her, students followed close, some steady, some pretending to be. Then, snap! A sharp sound cracked through the darkness. And then the silence hit even harder, like the cave swallowed the air itself. Before anyone could react, shadow wolves erupted out of the black. No growls, no footfalls, just sudden impacts, bodies being slammed, claws raking armor. "Ambush," someone yelled, but the word died the moment it left their mouth. A silence field. Sound just vanished. Panic spread fast. One student went down under a wolf's weight. Another dropped their staff as claws tore into their shoulder. The pack moved like smoke, striking from angles no one could track. Some students froze. Others spun in circles, terrified and blind. Elysia didn't. She pivoted and cut in a single clean arc. Her blade caught a wolf mid-leap. It burst in a black haze and disappeared. She pointed her sword and shouted orders, though nobody could hear her. Still, her gestures were clear. "Cluster up. Don't scatter." A second wolf launched at her. She brought her forearm up on instinct. Claws scraped down her armored sleeve and drew blood. The hit forced her back a step, but she stayed upright. Then her sword flared. Fire surged along the steel, lighting the tunnel in a red blaze. The wolves recoiled from the sudden brightness, their shapes finally clear in the glow. Everyone saw it. Elysia's arm bleeding, her breath hard, but her stance unshaken. She charged. Flaming steel cut through another wolf. Then another. Clean, ruthless strikes. The silence field made teamwork almost impossible. Nobody could call warnings. Nobody could hear cries. They had to fight by sight alone. A wolf clamped onto Elysia's calf, teeth biting deep. Her scream was soundless. She drove her sword down into its skull, killed it, and kicked the body away. Another wolf went for a fallen student. Elysia didn't think. She threw her sword. The blade sailed straight and buried itself in the wolf's chest before it could bite down. A heartbeat later, the silence spell broke. Sound rushed back like a flood. Students gasped. Someone cried out. Blood dripped on a stone. A few sat against the walls, shaking. But they were alive, because Elysia took control the moment everything went wrong. Not that she fought alone. Students rallied once they saw her moving. Magic flashed. Blade struck. A healer pulled someone out from under a wolf. But Elysia was the anchor, the one who kept the pack from turning the tunnel into a grave. Above them on a ledge, Professor Calden watched without a word, marking names in his list. Elysia von Arctria, a red distinction beside it. When the last wolf dissolved into smoke, Elysia limped to where her sword had landed and picked it up. Her arm was slick with blood, her leg trembling, but she stood tall anyway. "You okay?" someone asked, voice shaky. "Just a scratch," she said, even though it clearly wasn't. Healers moved in, light spilling over her injuries. Elysia faced the group, eyes hard. "We stay close. These wolves hunt with silence. If we split up, we're done." No one argued. They tightened ranks, firelight stones held higher now, and pushed deeper into the maw.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Group 2. The Group 2 had already advanced through the tunnel. The entrance they had passed through, Veil Shroud Gate, had long disappeared from view behind a bend in the cliff wall. The only thing ahead now was the unknown. 45 students, Most of them still inexperienced even though they were ranked, walked forward under the watchful eye of Professor Elysia. Her sharp violet eyes scanned the path ahead, but she let the students take initiative. This was their trial, not hers. Cale Ashford walked near the middle of the group. His sword was strapped to his back, eyes calmly reading the terrain. His face couldn't tell what he was thinking, but inside he was fully alert. Every turn, crack, and creepy silence in the dungeon reminded him exactly of what he had read in the novel before. He had a personal mission: find a location of the ancient coin, a key item mentioned only briefly in the novel's world lore. I should at least get the information about the ancient coin from here. I will diverge the things from here. The path they were walking on splits into two directions, like a Y shape. So now, they have to choose which way to go. From the left path, there was a faint humming sound. It wasn't loud, but it was strange, a soft metallic buzzing, like old machinery, still running deep underground. Occasionally, distant echoes bounced down the tunnel, making it seem alive, as if something or someone was moving in the distance. The right path was completely different. It was silent and still, with no sound at all. The air felt heavier. At the entrance stood two ancient, crumbling stone columns, half buried in moss and dirt. They looked like they once belonged to a temple or shrine, now lost to time. The students exchanged nervous glances, unsure which path was safer or more dangerous. Then Professor Elysia stepped forward. "This part of the trial is up to you," she said, looking at the group. "I don't give orders, but you must make this decision as a team. Choose your path." She stepped back, allowing the students to gather and discuss. For the first time, the weight of the mission fully rested on their shoulders. Edwin stepped forward instantly. "We go left. That hum, it's a sign of a relic zone. Probably high mana density." Several students murmured in agreement, but Cale's voice cut in calmly. "No, we take the right path." Edwin blinked. "Excuse me." Even Edwin was confused about where to go. Cale stepped forward, his eyes on the crumbling columns. "The left path leads into a mana-draining field. I've seen similar ruins in historical manuals. Magic fails in those zones, and relics become inert. Your spells and artifacts won't work." Edwin frowned. "And how did you just happen to know that?" Cale didn't answer. He merely pointed at the stone columns. "This path leads into ancient ruins, but it's stable. If we're careful, we can make it through." Professor Elysia said nothing. Her lips curled into a faint, interested smile. There was a brief silence. Then, Cecilia stepped beside Cale. "I agree with whatever he says." A few others nodded slowly. With a scowl, Edwin relented. "Fine, but if something happens, it's on you." They stepped into the passage. At first, it was uneventful, but after a few minutes, the atmosphere changed. The students started to feel tired and heavy, like something was weighing them down. Their magical energy, called mana, became slow and weak. Some students who used magic to sense things whispered that their powers weren't working well. They felt dull and weak. Even Cale felt a strange pressure in his chest, like the dungeon was trying to drain their strength. "Mana slow zone," whispered a mage behind him. "Our channels are clogged." "I told you," Cale muttered. It forced the group to rely on basics: torches for light, swords for defense, instincts for survival. Then came the real problem. As they went deeper, they entered a dark stone room. When the first students stepped on the cracked floor, glowing symbols briefly lit up, then went dark again. Professor Elysia looked surprised and said it was strange that there was no danger. But Cale felt very uneasy. He knew this place from the book he had read before. In the novel, this room was where someone had accidentally touched the wrong spot and caused a curse. This curse called angry spirits. Maybe they were the guardians of the deity that were part of an old, forgotten group called the Forgotten Claw. Cale warned the others, "Don't touch anything." A few students turned toward him. "I'm serious," he added. "This place is warded. One wrong move, and we trigger something none of us are ready for." He spoke in a low voice. Even Edwin, usually combative, looked unsure. Professor Elysia, curiously silent until now, studied Cale with narrowed eyes, then said aloud, "No one touches the inscriptions." Keep moving. As the group slowly walked through the tunnel, Kale stayed behind. He carefully looked at the walls, which were covered in old carvings and symbols from ancient Elysia. In the center of the room, there was a dark, slanted stone tablet with a broken symbol on it. Kale moved closer to take a better look. He studied them briefly, but didn't touch them. The rest of the group passed through the chamber quietly. Kale's gaze lingered on a broken obsidian tablet partially buried under rubble. Though the runes were too damaged to understand, something about the room made his instinct scream. This is where something dangerous happens in the novel. He remembered the scene. One of the side characters brushed against a pedestal and triggered a magical backlash that summoned cursed spirits, mistaking the group for enemies of the Forgotten Claw. That careless moment had almost wiped out all the heroes. "Don't touch anything," Kale said. Even Cecilia glanced back at him. "You all right?" He nodded calmly. "Yeah, just making sure nobody triggers dangerous things." They continued forward, leaving the shadowy chamber behind. The unease in Kale's chest remained. He hadn't found what he was looking for. As the group were busy doing other stuff, I stood busy sharpening my blades, clearly pretending to do something. He wasn't thinking about the fight earlier or the path they still had to travel. Instead, his mind wandered to something else, something that hadn't even happened yet. It was a memory from a novel he had once read. Before the midterm trials were over, an assassin had appeared. I don't remember about the Group 3, and clearly the novel was mostly focused on the Group 1 and 2. Since there are 4 assassins in the Group 2 to appear, I should at least diverge one of them, so the rest of them could handle 3 of the assassin. I don't have the strength to take head-on, therefore I should at least use other strategy. Kale clenched his jaw, finishing one final stroke on his blade. If I'm right, the assassin will appear in less time. And this time, Kale remembered it vividly from the novel he had read. "Let's move," said Edwin. Cecilia looked for Kale. Kale walked silently at the rear of the group, his hand brushing the wall as they passed deeper into the mountain. As they went deeper and deeper, the dungeon walls had shifted, more ancient, layered with time-worn carvings half buried under moss and mana erosion. But Kale recognized them. These patterns, this is it. He had read about this place in the novel. A chamber buried near a forgotten route, never explored by the protagonists, only mentioned in passing. Kale quietly stepped forward, tilting his head toward the wall as if checking for stability. But he wasn't checking. He was reading. Ancient symbols were carved into a slanted wall. Some were damaged and worn away, but one was still clear. Kale leaned in and narrowed his eyes. As he got closer, the symbol began to glow faintly. Suddenly, his vision blurred for a second. Then, without hearing any sound, words appeared in his mind. "The coin isn't where trees rot, but where ashes bleed. Under the broken altar, in the wastes where demons cried." Kale's heartbeat sped up. "That's it. One of the ancient coins. It's not in this dungeon. It's hidden in the ruins under an old altar, far away in the demon wastes. But where the hell in the world is that now?" Kale was down for that. He quickly drew a rough map, showing where he thought the coin might be. Then he folded the paper and hid it inside his pocket again. No one noticed. But Cecilia... "Kale," Cecilia called. "You all right?" "Yeah," he said casually. "Just making sure we're not walking into a collapse zone. Did something happen to you? You don't seem to be all right. Are you?" she asked calmly. He replied, "Nothing happened. I just had a headache over the dust from this tunnel," he lied. Then she handed me an elixir of mind ease tonic. "Drink this, and you will be all right." "Thank you." She nodded and turned. Moments later, as they moved through the tight corridor, lit only by torchlight, Cecilia froze. Then she gasped sharply, her eyes wide. "Why are you leaving me?" she whispered. Kale stopped, blinking. "What? You're all leaving me," she shouted, eyes panicked as if seeing something none of them could. The others turned, startled. "Cecilia," Edwin called, stepping forward. But she raised her hands defensively, flames igniting around her fingertips. "Don't come closer." She was caught in an illusion. Edwin moved slowly. "Cecilia, look at me. Breathe." She trembled. "No one's leaving you," he said softly. "It's a trick. You're seeing fear, not a fact." Her eyes were flickering of confusion battling fear. The flames wavered. "Everyone be cautious. This is the illusion trap," said Edwin. "You're not alone," said Edwin. Her lips parted slightly, and then, like mist clearing, the fear faded from her face. The fire vanished from her hands. She blinked rapidly. "What happened? Weren't we at the war?" she murmured. "We have entered the illusion trap. Be careful, Cecilia," he said. "Okay." Around her, the others were beginning to feel it too. One student suddenly screamed, "Get away from me." Another dropped their staff and backed into the wall, eyes wide in panic. "They're all dead. No, no, please, don't leave me here." The tunnel had become a trap of the mind. Edwin's eyes flickered around. "Illusion magic," he muttered. Then more loudly, "Everyone, stay calm. This is an illusion trap. What you're seeing isn't real. It's a trick. You're seeing fear, not a fact." "Don't listen to the illusion," Edwin said again. But it was useless. But screams echoed again from behind them. One boy clutched his head and shouted, "Make it stop." Another student fell to his knees, trembling, shouting something about monsters. Cale's eyes narrowed. "We don't have time to calm each person one by one." Then he used ideas about something. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small elixir fragment, a crystallized powder left from a magical tonic meant to calm down. "Edwin," Cale called. "Take this." Edwin turned. Cale tossed the fragment to him. "Use your strength, break it midair, and release the essence. It might snap everyone out of it at once." Edwin didn't hesitate. He raised his sword, gripped the fragment in his other hand, and focused. Then, with a sharp swing, he struck it. Crack! The elixir fragment burst into a glowing blue mist. It spread quickly through the air, filling the tunnel with a cool, calming light. One by one, the students gasped as the illusions faded. Eyes cleared. Screams stopped. Breathing was slowed. Everyone looked around, confused but safe. Edwin looked at Cale. "Thanks. That was smart thinking." Cale simply nodded. "This was nothing. Cecilia gave me that, and though it would work..." Cale simply nodded. "This was nothing. Cecilia gave me that earlier. Thought it might come in handy." The group gathered again, shaken but more cautious. Some exchanged quiet glances, grateful. Professor Elysia, observing from the back, marked her paper silently, 2 neat ticks beside Edwin and Cale's names. She gave a small nod of approval before following the group deeper into the tunnel. Everyone was settled after that illusion trap, and they began to move forward. An hour later, the corridor split again. This time, a chill blew from the left path, cold, unnatural. Edwin stopped at the fork, staring at a moss-covered wall of symbols. "There's power here," he said. "Old, strong. I think it leads somewhere important." Cecilia frowned. "It feels wrong." Ren, a quiet boy from the back, suddenly stepped closer, his eyes glazed. "I hear something." They turned. "What?" Edwin asked. Ren's voice was soft. "It says, follow the path. Find true power." "Damn it." He grabbed Ren's shoulder. "Snap out of it. That voice isn't real." Ren blinked hard, then stepped back, shaking his head. Edwin looked uncertain. "You think this leads somewhere dangerous?" Cale examined the markings. There were claw marks forming a spiral pattern on the ground or wall, and in the middle of them was a dark, burned-looking symbol, sigil. When he saw it, he immediately knew what it was that he had read about it before. A remnant of the Demon Lord's cult. "This is curse ground," Cale said quietly. "If we keep going, we'll trigger something we can't undo." "You sure?" Edwin asked. "I'm sure of this." Edwin hesitated, then, reluctantly, nodded. "All right, we'll reroute." As the group shifted direction, Cale subtly drew a chalk symbol on the stone near the cursed entrance. His own marker, a code only he would recognize if he ever came back. As the others moved ahead, chatting lightly now that the tension had eased, Cale remained at the rear, watching the shadows stretch along the walls. He had steered them clear of a deadly path, collected a secret no one else even noticed, and earned a small bit of trust from Edwin. Just as they reached the core chamber. The chamber was huge, shaped like a giant circle, almost like an old cathedral or temple. Around the edges stood tall, sharp stone pillars that looked worn and cracked with age. The ceiling was very high, so far up that they couldn't even see where it ended. It just disappeared into darkness. Above them were thin wisps of magical energy floated through the air, glowing faintly like drifting mist. In the middle of the room, there was a large stone platform and an earth core. So that is where we should light up our crystal there. Edwin, here we are. Finally, the core chamber where we light our crystal. From that platform of the core, 3 thin paths stretched out like bridges. Each path crossed over a deep, dark pit and led into a different tunnel on the other side. We made it, one student breathed. So this is the dungeon's core? Another said, their voice filled with a happy face. Professor Elysia raised a hand. Stay alert. The core is rarely undefended. Kale, standing near the rear, instinctively placed a hand on his sword hilt. His eyes scanned the platform and the 3 bridges branching towards the core. Edwin stepped forward. There should be a mechanism here to light the dungeon core, right? He asked. Yes, Cecilia nodded. Just like Professor Slivius said, the crystal is the key. Once it's lit, it purifies the dungeon and ends the trial. One of the students from the group rushed to the core with excitement. As soon as he stepped on the bridge, a sound came. Did you hear that? Someone whispered. Then came the thud. Another, and another. Shadows started moving near the edge of the deep pit. Then, from the darkness, dozens of glowing red eyes slowly appeared, watching them from the dark. It felt like something dangerous was waking up, hiding just beyond the light. Beasts, someone shouted. The shadows began to move and change, slowly turning into scary creatures. They were tall and hunched over, with long, sharp claws for hands. Their faces were hidden by swirling dark mist, making them look even more frightening. When they growled, it sounded like deep smoke rumbling through the air. Shadow beasts, one of the students from the back shouted. We've got to light the crystal. Edwin barked. It's the only way to seal them. Kale stepped beside him. They won't be easy to handle. The more we fight, the more they'll come. We need to act fast. As if on cue, the beasts lunged forward. The first wave hit the outer ranks. Clang! Steel met claws. Students scattered and regrouped, their weapons clashing against the dark creatures. Cecilia raised a barrier to shield a wounded classmate. 2 students were knocked off their feet, scrambling to rise again. They just keep coming, one cried. This dungeon quest is too hard, another yelled, slashing wildly. But others gritted their teeth and fought back. All that brutal training back at the academy is finally paying off, shouted a boy from the front, fighting with his spear. Focus and protect the crystal, someone said. Edwin grabbed the crystal tightly. Inside, a single crystal shard pulsed with inner light. It was fragile, meant to be cracked at the right moment at the core. Anyone cover me, he shouted. Kale nodded quickly and ran ahead. One of the shadow beasts came at him, but he swung his sword fast and clean, cutting it down in one blow. Before he could breathe, another beast jumped at him from the side. Kale reacted fast. He ducked low, rolled under its attack, and then stabbed his sword upward into the creature's belly. Right behind him, Cecilia was helping. She threw firebolts at the shadow beasts, each blast lighting up the dark chamber. The flames pushed the monsters back, stopping them from getting too close or surrounding the others. Edwin made it to the center, breathing heavily. Now or never, he muttered. With a swift motion, he cracked the crystal shard against the core. Crack! A burst of light exploded outward, illuminating the entire core chamber. The light washed over the shadow beasts, and they howled in agony. One by one, they melted into smoke, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. It's working, a girl cried. The crystal, it's driving them away. The light spread across the 3 paths and into the cavern above. The pressure in the chamber lifted, as if a weight had been pulled off their chests. The air cleared. The students stood frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, cheers erupted. We did it! We survived the core. All the students light up the crystal at the core, and Kale lights the crystal at the last. Some students dropped to their knees, panting. Cecilia looked at Kale, who was still standing near the core. "You did it." "It wasn't me, though," Cale thought. But she looked only for Cale, though Edwin did it. Edwin exhaled, then turned to Cale. "Couldn't have done it without your backup. I appreciate you for taking those weak beasts." Is this an insult or appreciation? Cale thought. Cale simply nodded. Well, it was a team effort. Professor Elysia walked to the core, inspecting the now glowing crystal. She nodded once, then turned to the group. "Well done. The core is lit. You've passed the hardest part of the dungeon quest." Some students slumped against the walls. Others helped their friends stand. One or two began tending to light injuries with spare healing salves. Cale stood quietly, gazing at the 3 branching tunnels. Professor Elysia again marked the tick of the names on her paper, and she said to leave the dungeon. This is where Cale began to think. In the original novel, the assassin struck when the student leaves the dungeon. It was a surprise attack. Casualties were avoided because the professors interfered in time. But I'm the only one who knows. From the 4 assassins, I should at least deal with the last one myself. I don't have the strength to face him directly. I'm no rank 1 like Edwin. But that doesn't mean I'm helpless. He glanced at Edwin and Cecilia, who were returning from the dungeon. That means, tonight, it will happen tonight. Cale stood up. As the others walked towards the exit point of the dungeon, talking, resting, or checking their gear, he quietly stepped away, making sure no one noticed. Where are you going? Cecilia asked, rising from a nearby rock. He gave a calm smile. Toilet. I won't be long. She gave a brief nod and walked away. Cale didn't waste any time. He slipped into the shadows near the outer wall of the cave, staying close to the edge so he wouldn't draw attention. He knew exactly where he was going. There's a side tunnel nearby. The assassin will use that to sneak in. The assassins would try to take a hidden path to attack the students just before they reached the dungeon trial exit point. And this time, he planned to stop one of them. He moved quickly through the side of the chamber until he reached a small crack in the stone wall, barely visible unless you knew it was there. Behind it, a narrow tunnel stretched forward. The ceiling was low, and Cale had to duck slightly as he entered. The walls were rough and old, covered in moss and crumbled stone. Dust clung to the air. This is the path. This passage will lead behind the main chamber. It was how the assassin had snuck in last time. He kept going, step by step, his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready for anything. The tunnel curved and twisted, and the deeper he went, the colder it became. The sounds of the group behind him faded, replaced by silence, an eerie, heavy kind of silence. Cale slowed his pace, reaching a small clearing at the end of the tunnel. It was just big enough to hide a person. He crouched low behind a pile of rocks, eyes fixed on the dark entrance of the tunnel. This is it. Those assassins would pass through here. If the novel is right, they'll appear soon. Cale took a deep breath and waited. Muscles felt tense, and mind stood sharp. Cale moved quietly and quickly. He didn't have much time. Using whatever he could find, vines, a rope from his pack, and nearby stones, he started building a trap. His hands moved with calm focus, even though his mind was alert and on edge. Every movement was quiet, careful not to make noise that could echo in the tunnel. He climbed up a small ledge just above the tunnel's entrance. From that height, he could see the narrow path below where someone would walk through. It was the perfect place to set up a surprise attack. On top of the ledge, Cale spotted a heavy boulder, large enough to knock someone out if it fell at the right moment. He rolled it carefully across the stone until it sat right above the path. But instead of letting it fall, he balanced it at the edge, using a single stick wedged under the front of the rock to hold it in place. Next, he tied a thin cord from that stick and stretched it across the path about waist height. The cord was hard to see unless someone was looking for it. It blended with the tunnel shadows. When someone walks through and touches this cord, it means I have to stretch manually to which target I want to. Cale thought. The stick will snap and the boulder will fall. He tugged the rope gently to test it. The stick wobbled and the boulder shifted slightly. Just enough. It's not perfect, Cale muttered to himself, but if they walk straight in, it'll work. Then he climbed back down and moved deeper into the tunnel. A few steps ahead, he went there, leaving a small open space behind it. It was just big enough for Cale to hide without being seen. He crouched behind the pillar, holding his breath for a moment. The trap was ready. Now all he had to do was to wait. Time has passed. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. He didn't return to the group. He waited in silence. Then, Cale waited silently in the shadows, completely still, his eyes fixed on the tunnel below. The area was quiet, so quiet that even the tiniest sound could be heard clearly. Then he heard it, a soft rustle, like fabric brushing against stone. Footsteps followed. They were going carefully, not rushed or loud. Whoever it was knew how to move quietly, without making much noise. From the tunnel, a person slowly appeared. Those persons wore tight black clothing, blending into the darkness. It was clear they didn't want to be seen. Their movements were smooth and quiet, almost like a shadow walking. At their side, a dagger hung. The blades were very sharp and deadly. Cale recognized the appearance instantly. It's them, the assassin from the novel. They are coming, just like I remembered. The assassins moved forward, staying close to the wall. Cale didn't move. He breathed slowly. Then it happened. The three assassins moved swiftly ahead, disappearing into the shadows of the tunnel. Cale's heart raced as he waited, doubting the novel's warning. He thought it had to be wrong. But then, from the darkness, the fourth figure appeared, cautious and silent. Cale held his breath as the last assassin approached. Carefully, Cale stretched a thin cord across the tunnel floor. It was so fine, so nearly invisible in the dim light, there was no way the assassin could spot it. Stepped. The assassin's foot struck the cord when he pulled the cord carefully. Snap! The cord tightened instantly, pulling sharply on the stick above. The trap was triggered. Snap! A sharp crack echoed as the wooden stick holding the trap in place broke. In an instant, the heavy boulder that had been carefully balanced above came crashing down. Thud! The giant stone slammed directly into the assassin's back, knocking him off his feet and pinning him to the ground. The impact left the assassin groaning in pain, stunned and unable to move properly. The rest of the assassins had already reached Group 2. Cale didn't waste a moment. He leaped down from the ledge where he had been hiding, landing beside the fallen man. Quickly, he grabbed a vine and tied the assassin's hands together, pulling them tightly behind his back. Then, he secured another rope around the assassin's legs, making sure he couldn't escape or fight back. The man struggled weakly, his body twitching against the ropes. But the boulder's impact had drained most of his strength. He couldn't break free. Cale crouched beside him and leaned in close. Quiet, he warned. One sound, and the rest of the professors will be here. You don't want that, he lied. The assassin bared his teeth, a snarl rising in his throat, but he didn't speak. He understood the threat. Cale grabbed the ropes and began to drag the man. It was slow, rough work. The assassin's body scraped lightly along the stone floor, and Cale made sure to keep his steps steady and quiet. He made sure nobody noticed. They moved deeper into the tunnel, away from the others. The light faded behind them. Finally, Cale reached the far side where no one would see, and it was quite abandoned. He pulled the man upright and propped him against the damp stone wall. The assassin sat slumped, breathing heavily, eyes watching Cale with quiet hatred. In Group 2. Group 2 had just completed their dungeon exploration when the ground trembled faintly beneath them. Then, footsteps. 3 shadows emerged from the darkness ahead. They were dressed in black, their faces hidden beneath masks. Cold, deadly eyes scanned the students. The assassins had arrived. A wave of panic surged through the group like a crashing tide. Some students instinctively stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. A few students handled their weapons in fear. Some others were simply froze, too shocked to move or speak. The dim tunnel walls echoed with gasps and hurried footsteps. We're under attack, a voice shouted, cracking with fear. But not everyone was afraid. Professor Elysia stepped forward calmly. She didn't flinch or raise her voice, and the look of her eyes were dead serious. Beside her stood Edwin. His stance was firm, and his eyes were focused. Power seemed to radiate from him. With slow, practiced movement, he drew his sword. The blade gleamed in the dim light of the tunnel. Then, Cecilia spun around, scanning the group. Her heart was already racing. "Where's Kale?" she whispered to herself, breathing short and tight in her chest. She turned in every direction, searching for his face among the students, but he didn't return. Before she could take another step, a blur of movement caught everyone's attention. Suddenly, one of the assassins moves forward like a shadow. His blade flashed under the faint dungeon light, sharp and deadly. Without warning, he charged straight toward the group of students, fast, silent, and with killing intent in his eyes. Gasps echoed as students stumbled back, their eyes wide with fear. But before the assassin could get close, Professor Elysia raised her hand. Her movement was calm but precise, like she had done this 100 times before. In that instant, a soft hum filled the air. A bright shimmer of energy spread out from her like a wave. It pulsed across the tunnel. It felt like time itself slowed down. The assassin stopped suddenly in the middle of his run, his feet sliding as a bright magical shield appeared between him and the students. The shield hit him with such force that it pushed him back, like he had run into a wall made of air. The students watched with wide eyes. Their fear started to fade, replaced by amazement. Everything feels different now. Professor Elysia stood in front of them, calm and strong, like a protector. She is ranked 91th of the national level. With her calm voice, she said, "Since you have chosen this, you have no escape." "Edwin," she said, "take the one on the left." He nodded. "Yes, Professor." The assassins moved like blades through wind, fast, silent, and lethal. One leaped toward the students. Another charged straight at Professor Elysia. The last veered off toward Edwin, as if sensing strength in him worth testing. The battle began. Edwin versus assassin. The assassin's dagger flashed through the air, aiming for Edwin's throat. He quickly ducked down, rolled across the ground, and swung his sword upward. His blade hit the assassin's short sword with a loud clash, sending sparks flying. The assassin stepped back with a grunt, then jumped off the wall and attacked again, moving incredibly fast. But Edwin was fast too. He blocked every strike. His movements were smooth. "You're strong," the assassin said through his mask. "But not strong enough." Edwin narrowed his eyes. "We'll see." Suddenly, the assassin dropped a small bomb to the ground. Smoke exploded everywhere, covering the tunnel in darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then, clang, steel against steel. Edwin moved through the smoke like a shadow, his sword shining as he swung it through the air. He could tell where the assassin would strike and blocked or dodged every attack before hitting back. "I've trained too for this," Edwin said quietly. "You won't be able to take down anyone today." Then he made one strong, clean strike. His sword broke through the assassin's defense. The assassin fell to the ground with a groan. Edwin, empowered by the rune he had activated, felt strength surge through his body. His grip tightened around the hilt. With one powerful swing, he slashed downward. The force of the blow was so great that it shook the ground. Dust and debris exploded into the air, filling the tunnel in a thick dust. Some students shielded their eyes, coughing. Others stared in shock. "Was that really Edwin?" one whispered. "He's gotten so strong." Another murmured, awe in their voice. Edwin stood over him, his sword pointed at the man's neck. "It's over," he said. Then Professor Elysia versus assassin. The second assassin charged straight at Professor Elysia with his blades flashing in the dim light. He moved fast where his footsteps were light and deadly, aiming to take her down in a single blow. But Elysia didn't move. Calmly, she raised her hand and spoke a quiet chant under her breath. Glowing symbols lit up beneath her feet, and a runed circle formed in an instant. A wave of light spread out from her, glowing and humming with power. The assassin's blade came down hard, but it struck something invisible. A magical barrier appeared in front of Elysia, stopping the attack with a loud crack. Sparks flew through the air as metal clashed with magic. The assassin quickly stepped to the left, pretending to strike again. Then, with a quick twist, he aimed for her on the other side. But Elysia was ready. She moved smoothly, like flowing water. Her hand rose with perfect timing, deflecting the blade. With her free hand, she released a burst of glowing energy that slammed into the assassin's chest, making him stumble backward. Before he could recover, Elysia waved again. A sweeping spell shot out like a gust of wind, knocking the assassin off his feet and pushing him several steps back. She stood tall and calm, her magic pulsing with strength. The assassin growled in frustration with the eyes burning with anger. With a sudden burst of speed, he jumped onto the side wall of the tunnel, using it like a springboard. His body twisted midair, and both of his swords spun rapidly in his hands as he came down toward Elysia like a whirlwind of steel. But Elysia didn't panic. Her palm began to glow with swirling energy. Just as the assassin neared, she thrust her hand forward. A powerful burst of wind shot out from her palm, a blast of raw magic. It slammed into the assassin's body midair, knocking the wind out of him and throwing him down hard against the stone floor. Thud! Dust rose around him as he hit the ground, groaning in pain. Elysia calmly stepped closer, her hands still glowing with bright, pulsing magic. Her face showed no fear, no anger, just cold control. The assassin growled again and forced himself to his feet, then tried to lunge at her one more time. But suddenly, his legs stopped moving. He looked down, and then he was shocked. A glowing rune had formed beneath his feet, etched into the stone itself. His muscles locked up. He couldn't move. What is this?" he gasped. Elysia stopped right in front of him. Her eyes were unreadable. "This is Arcadia," she said softly. "We need to keep them alive." She raised her staff and whispered a final chant. Chains made of glowing light sprang from the air, wrapping around the assassin's arms and legs, binding him completely. He collapsed, fully restrained, and was unable to fight anymore. Students versus assassin. The third assassin, damn, where did that shithead go? The last assassin stood facing the rest of the class. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd of students in front of him. Some of them were shaking slightly, their hands gripping weapons and staff tightly. Fear was in their eyes, but not weakness. None of them ran. They all stood their ground. The assassin smirked behind his mask. "So many lambs," he muttered, amused. "Easy prey." But he was wrong. Before he could take another step, Leora raised her staff and cast a fireball straight at him. At the same moment, Seraphina slammed her hands to the ground, summoning a wave of earth to rise and crash forward. The assassin moved fast, flipping over the fireball and dodging the wave with a sharp twist of his body. But Arwen and Celine were already closing in from both sides, short swords flashing. They slashed at him with precision, forcing him to block and spin in place. Clang! Steel met steel, and sparks flew. The assassin growled and kicked Arwen hard, sending her sliding back. He turned to attack Celine next, but a pebble flew into his side. He shouted and turned towards it. Isolde, standing near the back, had her hand raised and ready for another shot. But the students didn't stop there. More spells rained down, ice spikes, wind blades, and blinding light. They moved with teamwork. One student cast shields while another cast illusions. Some attacked close up while others launched spells from afar. They covered each other, defended each other, and moved as one. The assassin, now bleeding and furious, fought back fiercely. He was no ordinary enemy. His skills were far beyond what they had faced in training. He knocked down 7 more students, cut through barriers, and nearly reached the center of the group. Even though they were giving their best, it wasn't enough. "He's too strong," one student cried. Suddenly, a sword light burst through the tunnel. Edwin appeared beside them, sword glowing with power. "Fall back. Let me handle." At the same time, Professor Elysia quickly stepped forward behind them. With a flick of her hand, a massive wall of light slammed into the assassin, forcing him to stumble. Together, Edwin and the students launched a synchronized attack, while Elysia unleashed a wave of binding magic. Spells lit up the tunnel like stars. The combined power of the class, their teacher, and Edwin was unstoppable. After a fierce and exhausting struggle, the assassin finally dropped to his knees, his weapons falling from his hands. Glowing spell circles surrounded him. Swords and staff were pointed in every direction. He was defeated, completely surrounded and overwhelmed. He looked up, breathing heavily. This wasn't a class of frightened children. Damn it, they're strong. I have underestimated them. Assassin's confusion. Bound and beaten, one of the assassins growled through his pain. Where is the other one? Another coughed, blood on his lips. That shithead. I will kill him. Professor Yulia raised an eyebrow. Other one. Edwin frowned. There are many. Meanwhile, Cecilia. Cecilia stood near the back of the group. Her heart was pounding hard. She scanned the crowd, her bright emerald eyes darting from one face to another, trying to spot someone. Where's Cale? She thought, panic growing with every second. But he wasn't there. Without thinking, Cecilia turned and broke into a run, rushing down a narrow side tunnel. Cale! She shouted, her voice echoing off the cold stone walls. Where the hell did you go? She didn't care about the danger behind her, the fighting. She was worried about him. Her boots thudded against the stone floor as her pace quickened. Cale had disappeared just moments before the assassins attacked. That couldn't be a coincidence. Why would he leave right before the ambush? Did he sense something? Or was he already in danger? Is he okay? But there was nothing. She ran everywhere. Just an empty, silent stretch of tunnel. The air felt colder here, heavy with unease. The only sound was the silence of the tunnel and students murmuring from Group 2. Then, she heard the soft sound. Cecilia froze as her heart leapt in her throat. She ran toward the sound with her straight eyes. Her mind raced. Another assassin? No. Cale's out here somewhere. What if he ran into one of them? Her breath caught in her chest. Cale had no chance against those assassins. He was still behind the others in training. If he was fighting one alone, he might already be. Her voice came out low, tight with emotion, with a mix of fear and hope. Cale Ashford. On the other hand, while chaos unfolded in Group 2's tunnel, something far more dangerous had been brewing quietly in Group 1's path, and no one knew it. 7 assassins had been hiding in wait to attack. They were skilled, deadly, and patient. Hidden deep in the shadows of the tunnel walls and behind piles of debris, they had been watching and waiting. Their plan was to strike when the group was most relaxed, when they least expected it. Group 1 had just completed their dungeon challenge and was preparing to leave. Some students were laughing quietly. Others were wiping sweat from their brows. A few had their weapons sheathed already. They believed the worst was behind them. They had no idea they were moments away from an ambush. Then there was a flicker of light from one of the assassins. One of the assassins lifted his hand, and a faint light briefly shined in the darkness. It was a signal, a coded gesture, simple and quick, but it carried a message. The assassins, through hidden marks and silent magic, had been linked in communication. A signal from deep in the tunnels had just reached them. 4 assassins have been defeated. Students are fighting back. Academy staff are present. That final message changed everything. They paused. The leader of the 7, a tall figure with a curved blade strapped to his back, clenched his jaw behind his mask. His eyes narrowed as he processed the news. 4 of their own, taken down by students, and worse, professors were with them. This wasn't the simple infiltration they'd planned. It was supposed to be a clean sweep, a silent mission, and an easy message to the academy. You are vulnerable. But now everything has changed. The leader raised 2 fingers, then quickly dropped them, a universal sign among the group. Abort! And then all the assassins began to retreat, swift and silent, and are perfectly coordinated with each other. They moved like shadows, disappearing into cracks in the walls, scaling the jagged stones silently, and slipping deeper into the maze of tunnels that webbed beneath the ground. Their plan had failed, but they had not yet been seen, or so they thought, because right before they could fully escape, one student turned her head. It was Alina, a sharp-eyed mage near the back of the group. She paused, sensing something off. A faint shimmer, a glint of metal. Her brows furrowed. She took a step forward, scanning the edge of the cavern. Then, just as she was about to look away, she saw it. A brief flicker of movement at the edge of the shadows. It wasn't the kind of random motion that came from wind, and it was sharp, deliberate, and far too fast to be anything natural. Too quick, too precise. A chill ran down her spine as realization sank in. Was someone there? Her breath hitched, caught between fear and certainty, as her instinct screamed that this was no trick of the eye and this was real. Wait, she whispered, just loud enough for the nearby students to hear. Something's there. The laughter faded. The students turned. They followed her gaze. At first, they saw nothing. Then, the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel, light, quick, and barely noticeable, like whispers on stone. It was the kind of movement that vanished almost as quickly as it came, but for those who caught it, it was unmistakable. A sudden realization struck several students at once. Is this a beast trial? One of them murmured in confusion. We just finished the dungeon quest. Why is something else starting already? The idea spread like wildfire. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the group. Many began to think this was simply the next phase of their test, something the Academy had planned to challenge them. From behind, a student added with a chuckle, maybe it's a hidden boss round. Another scoffed, TSH, they're just testing our alertness. Typical mountain. Some students even relaxed slightly, misreading the signs. Oh, look, one of them said with a grin, they're running away. Must be part of the dungeon trial script. They must have realized we cleared already. Stupid beasts, someone else muttered, trying to sound brave. They got scared and ran. But not everyone was so quick to laugh. Alina's sharp eyes remained fixed on the direction the shadows had moved. Her grip on her staff stood tight. She wasn't so sure this was part of any school-sanctioned trial. Up ahead, only two figures remained visible, far down the tunnel. The last of the assassins, their dark cloaks blending into the dim tunnel. They didn't advance. They didn't speak. They just stood still for a moment, watching. Then, one of them, taller than the rest, locked eyes with Elena. Even from that distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. Cold, calculating, dangerous. A silent warning passed between them. Next time. Next time. The words echoed faintly in the air. Before anyone could respond, the mysterious figure turned away and melted into the shadows, vanishing without a trace. Then slowly, the students began to move. Some cautiously raised their weapons, ready in case danger returned. Others glanced around, their faces tense and uncertain, not sure if the threat was truly gone. Who were they? One student finally asked in a quiet voice, breaking the silence. I don't know who they were, another replied, their voice filled with confusion. Elena said nothing. Her lips were pressed into a tight line as her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness of the tunnel, the place where the figure had disappeared. She felt something in her chest, a twisting feeling. Those things they had encountered, they weren't beasts. Somehow she just knew. Group 2, where Kale is. Kale stood over the tied-up assassin. Ropes dug tightly into the man's arms and legs, leaving no room for escape. You're fully tied now, Kale said with his low voice. So let's make this simple. I need answers. The assassin groaned in pain, his face twisted with defiance. You won't get anything from me. Kale didn't flinch. He slowly drew his sword from its sheath. He simply let the quiet sound of steel sliding free speak for itself. Then he knelt, keeping his voice low. I know you didn't come here without purpose, Kale said. I know there's something hidden about the ancient thing. The assassin's eyes widened slightly. What is he even talking about? What ancient thing? He clenched his jaw and said nothing, trying to stay unreadable. Kale leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I know about the coin. The ancient coin. Where is it? The assassin's heart skipped. The coin? Wait, is he serious? Why is he talking about that now? Isn't he supposed to kill me? What is wrong with this guy? Then a new thought crossed his mind, and with it, a spark of hope. Maybe he's distracted. He's digging for information. That means... The assassin smirked, despite the pain. You know about it, and yet you're asking me? You must be desperate. He flexed his wrists slightly, testing the rope. Good, just a little more. If I act fast enough, I can break free and kill him before he finishes his next sentence. But Kale's eyes remained steady, and his grip on the sword didn't loosen. Kale didn't blink. I don't need all the details. Just the next clue. A direction. A name. Where his must be. Silence. The assassin narrowed his eyes at Kale, silently judging him. This guy's an idiot. He won't be able to kill me. No chance. Then, in a cautious voice, he asked, "If I tell you the truth, will you untie me?" Kale stared at him with his weird expression. "That depends," he said calmly. "If you give me all the information, truthfully and completely, then maybe." If he unties him, he'll strike the moment he's free. But I ain't that foolish. I'm watching every move. But the assassin didn't know that. He smirked inwardly. The moment I'm free, I'll kill him in one blow. The assassin took a deep breath and began to speak. "Our Lord." He once possessed the ancient coin, but now he's grown so powerful that he no longer needs it. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did he do with it?" "He scattered them," the assassin replied. "He gave the coins to his most trusted subordinates, spread across the world. We even use them ourselves to trade for powerful skills." Kale's grip on his sword tightened. "Lord," the assassin paused, then answered carefully, "Yes, our Lord." We're not allowed to speak his full name. If we do, he looked up at Kale with a deadly seriousness in his eyes. "We die from the curse." "What kind of lord is that?" "To get that ancient coin," the assassin said slowly, a mocking smile on his face, "you'd have to take it from a shadow disciple." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Shadow disciple." The assassin let out a dry laugh. "Huh, you don't even understand what that means, do you?" He leaned forward, voice full of scorn. You're not even worthy to face one. A shadow disciple can be rank A, even rank S. They're elites, deadly and terrifying. Each one is trained by the Abyss Wardens themselves. His tone darkened. You'd be crushed like an ant before you could even speak one word. Kale stayed silent, but his heart beat faster. Wait, if a shadow disciple is that strong, and they're not even the top rank, then even the lowest of the 3 ranks under the Demon Lord must be monsters. He clenched his fists. And I'm nowhere near ready. The assassin lowered his voice to a whisper, almost as if afraid the shadows themselves might hear him. "Beneath the ruins of Eldrith," he muttered. "When silence reigns," that's what we were told. His words hung in the air like a curse. Kale's eyes widened slightly. "The ruins of Eldrith, the place exists. I've read about it in the novel. So it's real, and the coin is there." The assassin looked around nervously and added in a trembling voice, We're not supposed to speak after that. Not a word more." Kale remained quiet, processing what he'd just learned. The assassin gave a weak, bitter chuckle. "You won't make it there. None of you will. That place isn't meant for the normal loser like you." Kale slowly rose to his feet. "We'll see." Without hesitation, he pressed the hilt of his sword firmly against the side of the assassin's neck. The assassin immediately tensed, realizing what was about to happen. Kale's voice spoke final. "Now that I got what I need, it's time for you to say goodbye." The assassin's face twisted with fury. "You traitor!" he shouted, spitting the words out. The assassin's eyes flared with rage, his body trembling as dark energy gathered around him. "You brought this on yourself," he shouted. "If I die, you die with me." With a final burst of violent energy, his body erupted. Boom! Boom! A powerful explosion tore through the air, hurling Kale backwards like a rag doll. He was thrown several meters, crashing hard against the stone wall of the dungeon. Dust and smoke filled the space. Kale lay motionless on the ground. His clothes were torn, blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and his body was covered in burns and bruises. He tried to move, but pain shot through every muscle. He couldn't lift a finger. He groaned weakly, barely able to speak. His vision blurred as he slipped in and out of consciousness. Meanwhile, far from Kale's position, a thunderous boom echoed through the dungeon. Cecilia froze. Her eyes widened. What was that? The sound had come from deep within the tunnels, and it was loud enough that the rest of the group heard it too. "Did you hear that?" One student whispered, gripping their weapon tightly. Another looked around nervously. Was that an explosion? More voices rose in murmurs and panic. Could it be another assassin? Is someone hurt? Professor Elysia came sprinting down. "Everyone," she shouted. "Head toward the sound. said Edwin. Cecilia didn't wait. She ran ahead, and her heart was pounding, dread building with every step. Cale, please be okay. The three assassins who had been captured earlier sat on the ground, their bodies bruised and bound tightly in ropes. Despite their injuries, they spoke in low, shaken voices. Huh, did he really self-destruct? One of them muttered, eyes wide with disbelief. Who was he fighting? Another assassin frowned, his face pale. Who did he face? That strong? Strong enough to force him to blow himself up. The third one gritted his teeth. Damn it, we underestimated them. We thought these students would be easy. The three fell silent for a moment, realizing how badly they had misjudged the situation. Meanwhile, a group of students and professors had arrived at the scene of the explosion. When Cecilia saw Cale lying on the ground with the blood spill around, still and motionless, her heart dropped. Cale! She screamed and ran toward him. Professor Yulia's eyes widened in shock. She immediately reached into her robe and tore a talisman marked with the Arcadia Academy seal. The magical paper burned away in her hand, activating a signal for emergency medical support. As the magic slowly disappeared into the air like glowing dust, Professor Yulia looked around. The ground was blackened and burned from the explosion. Pieces of stone and rubble were scattered everywhere. The air still smelled like smoke and ash. It was clear that something powerful and dangerous had happened here. What happened here? Was this really just a student fight? Professor Yulia thought. Don't tell me. She knelt beside Cale with Cecilia, both of them quickly checking his condition. He was badly injured, his clothes torn, skin bruised and burnt, and a trail of blood at the corner of his mouth. He's still breathing, Professor Yulia said softly, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. But it's weak, very weak. Cale's chest rose and fell with short, rough gasps. Cecilia's eyes filled with worry. Hang in there, Cale, please. At the academy, the moment Professor Yulia tore the emergency talisman, the air around her shimmered with the light. The magical paper dissolved into glowing sparks. Within seconds, that signal reached the office of Arcadia Academy. Principal's office, Arcadia Academy. Inside one of its quiet, high rooms, shelves were filled with old books, scrolls, and magical objects that gave off a soft glow. It was peaceful until something suddenly appeared. A glowing light floated in the air. It was the signal from the emergency talisman and was urgent. It pulsed in front of Principal Alder II, who had been reviewing reports behind his desk. From the Frostvale Mountain, the moment he saw it, his calm expression changed. He stood up immediately. A heavy silence filled his office. What happened this time? He said quietly, though his tone was sharp and full of concern. He waved his hand, and the light expanded, displaying a flashing mark that signified only one thing: an emergency field call from a professor. His eyes narrowed. Yulia wouldn't activate that unless it was serious. Infirmary, Arcadia Academy. Back in the Academy's infirmary, the moment the talisman triggered the emergency ward, glowing sigils on the walls and floors began to light up. All the infirmary staff sprang into action. Emergency response. Oh, some severely injured person, a staff member called out, already preparing a healing bed with magical runes. Others ran to gather potions, bandages, and enchanted scrolls for faster recovery. One of the healers turned to the others. It came from the dungeon zone. That's where the first-year groups were sent. This emergency talisman came from Frostvale Mountain. Dungeon quest? How could it go this wrong? Another muttered, setting up a mana stabilizer. In the academy courtyards, among second- and third-year students, they saw the emergency backup going outside the academy. In the training yards known as Ground 1 for second year and Ground 3 for third-year students began murmuring and gathering in groups. What's going on? One student asked, tightening the straps of his gloves. I saw the emergency talisman. Was that a talisman call? Another replied. I heard it came from the dungeon zone. Are they really sending backup for the first years? A third year scoffed. Those bunch of losers? What do they do now? Fall into a trap set by weakling beasts. But another student stepped forward, voice serious. No, I overheard a professor. They went to Frostvale Mountain for their dungeon test. That place isn't a joke. When we were in the first year, we took 5 days to complete and to return. A hush fell over the group. Wait, Frostvale? Exactly. If something went wrong there. The students exchanged nervous looks, and even the most arrogant ones stopped laughing. Group 1 and Group 3 hear the news. Meanwhile, Group 1 and Group 3, still in different parts of the dungeon, were gathering after finishing their assigned paths when they heard the signal and the whispers carried by wind magic from the academy. The emergency also alarmed Professor Sylvia. Did this emergency come from Group 2's directions dungeon? One student in Group 1 said. Should we follow? Group 3 nodded. We're not leaving anyone behind. If something attacked them, it might still be there. Let's go, someone shouted. Without hesitation, both groups began moving quickly through the dungeon's paths. They're back at the scene, Kale and the aftermath. By the time Group 1, Group 3, and the medical team arrived at the site of the explosion, Professor Elysia and the remaining students of Group 2 had already begun clearing the area. The air was thick with heat and the sharp, bitter smell of burned spell. The once solid dungeon floor was now cracked and blackened. Pieces of rock were scattered everywhere, and smoke drifted slowly through the tunnel like fog. Bits of glowing ash still hung in the air, falling like silent snow. Even though the battle had ended, the air felt heavy, like the walls themselves had witnessed something. In the center of it all, Kale lay still. His body was sprawled on the ground, his clothes torn, stained with dirt and blood. Cuts lined his arms. A line of blood came from the side of his mouth. He was breathing lightly and unevenly, and he was barely alive. Cecilia was kneeling right beside him. Her hands were trembling as she touched his forehead. Kale, please hold on, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Her heart felt like it might stop with every faint breath he took. Professor Elysia stood nearby, composed but tense. She gave precise instructions to the healers who had just arrived. Stabilize his vitals. Keep him conscious if possible. Don't move him too quickly. He might have internal injuries, she said firmly. The medics responded immediately, opening their glowing medical kits and spreading runes across the stretcher. One softly chanted a healing spell, while another carefully examined Kale's body, checking his pulse and breathing. Not far from them, 3 assassins were tied tightly with enchanted ropes. Their bodies were bruised and their faces pale. They groaned quietly, the pain clearly written on their expressions, but none dared speak. Their eyes darted around, catching glimpses of Kale and the gathering students. By now, students from Group 1 and Group 3 were flooding into the area. Gasps and murmurs filled the dungeon corridor. What in the world happened here? A boy from Group 1 whispered, stepping back in shock. Look at the walls. This explosion would have made me into dust. Then someone pointed toward Kale and the captured assassins. Wait, weren't there 4 assassins reported? Yes, 3 were caught earlier. That means Kale faced the last one. Alone. There was a pause. Is that even possible? Another student asked, disbelief in their voice. I heard the explosion from the other tunnel, the 3rd group arriving late. It was a self-destruction spell. That assassin blew himself up. And Kale survived that. The crowd was frozen, speechless for a moment. Elysia stood at the back, arms crossed, her sharp eyes locked on Kale's unmoving form. She didn't speak, but her thoughts raced silently. I knew it. I knew he was hiding something. He's been pretending to be weak, always acting quiet, always staying in the background. But no ordinary first year could survive a self-destruction spell, not unless they had serious combat instincts or some hidden power. Her gaze narrowed. Were you really planning, Kale? She saw Cecilia kneeling beside Kale. Something inside her twisted. A sharp wave of anger and fear washed over her. Why, Cecilia? Why are you standing so close to him? Don't you understand? He's not weak. He's not harmless like he pretends to be. He's dangerous, powerful, and hiding something big. Elysia clenched her fists at her sides, but said nothing. The words burned on the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed them. Even if I told you the truth right now, you wouldn't believe me. You'd defend him. You'd say I'm overthinking. that he's just quiet, just misunderstood. So she stayed silent. She looked away for a moment, biting her lower lip, trying to calm the anger storming inside her. She wanted to tell Cecilia, warn her, to step away from Kale, to be careful. But she couldn't. But not in front of everyone. There were too many people around. Too many eyes watching. So Elysia said nothing. She kept her thoughts locked deep inside and stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching, waiting. One day, you'll see the truth, Cecilia. And when you do, I just hope it won't be too late. Professor Slivia, as his class monitor, I failed the second time. He's badly hurt, one of the healers said, placing a mana seal over Kale's chest. He is breathing barely, but we're not sure whether he will live or die. But we'll try our best. Cecilia stood up with them, refusing to let go of Kale's hand. She walked alongside the floating stretcher, her eyes never leaving his pale, bruised face. I'm going with him, she said firmly to the healers. No problem, one of them replied kindly. Just don't get in the way. He'll need immediate care the moment we reach the infirmary. Cecilia walked closely beside him, and her hand gently held onto Kale's, refusing to let go, her steps matching the healer's. But before she could take another step forward, Elysia suddenly stepped in. Cecilia, she said sharply. Cecilia barely turned her head, her voice soft. I'm going with him. Without saying a word, Elysia reached out and grabbed her wrist firmly. Then, in a swift motion, she pulled Cecilia a few steps back, away from the stretcher. Hey, what are you doing? Let go, Cecilia said. Elysia looked around quickly. He needs emergency care, she said. If you stay close, it could interfere. You'll only be in the way right now. Elysia shook her head, her voice low but steady. You are also a healer, but they need space to work. His condition is critical. You standing there won't help him breathe easier. But Alicia's grip loosened, and her tone softened just slightly. I know you care about him, but right now the best thing you can do is let them do their job. Cecilia hesitated. She looked at Kale's body again as it floated away slowly with the healers, glowing runes still pulsing under him. Her heart ached, but Alicia's words were painful and made sense. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. Elysia let go of her hand. For a moment, Cecilia just stood there, watching the healers turn the corner with Kale. The sight of him disappearing from view made her chest tighten. Then she whispered, mostly to herself, please, don't die. As Cecilia turned her face away, wiping her eyes quickly, Elysia silently watched her. But behind her cool expression, her thoughts were spinning. Kale, you're not normal. And sooner or later, everyone will see that. The walk back. The group slowly began their march out of the dungeon. Several healers walked beside him, hands glowing with soft magic to keep his vitals stable. Every few steps, one of them would glance at his condition or adjust the runes to make sure he stayed alive. Right behind them were the 3 tied-up assassins, dragged along by stern-faced Academy guards. The assassins were heavily chained, their mouths sealed with silencing magic. The guards used magic chains, silencing spells, and enchanted ropes to make sure they couldn't escape. Their faces were bruised and pale, and though they didn't speak, their eyes darted wildly, perhaps from the anger. The rest of the students walked several steps behind, the crowd unusually silent for such a large group. The explosion had shaken everyone. The dungeon, which once felt like just another test, now felt like the edge of a battlefield. Slowly, some of the first-year students whisper among themselves. Was he always this strong? Someone asked, looking toward Kale's motionless body with wide eyes. Another replied quietly, I don't think so. He's always been quiet, kept to himself, never stood out. Especially the weekend, I don't usually see him. Maybe he goes out to roam around. But he fought off an assassin one-on-one. Alone, someone muttered, and survived a self-destruction spell. That's not just strong, that's insane. In a self-destruct, we would fly several meters away. A third voice joined in, full of disbelief. Maybe he was hiding his power all along. Or maybe the assassin was weak at all. A girl shook her head. No, this This isn't something about weak, because if assassins were weak, they would not dare to attack. Then another boy added, in a tone both curious and nervous, "You are right about this." The idea lingered in the air like a ghost. No one denied it. Again from near the back of the crowd, someone spoke. A tall student with sharp eyes and a thoughtful expression. "Things are changing," he said. "And not just for us. The Academy won't ignore this. They'll start asking questions. Someone just tried to kill a first year. That's not normal. This isn't just a test anymore." Someone else nodded slowly. "That was an assassination attempt. That means someone planned this carefully, and Kale was somehow at the center of it." Alina stood among the crowd. "So, why saw back there? Those weren't beasts. She thought they were assassins." A few students turned toward her, eyes widening. Then she told near her that what she saw was an assassin. "Assassins? Are you sure?" one of them asked. Alina nodded. The way they moved, the way they looked, wasn't wild or chaotic like a beast. It was precise, trained and skilled. Another student frowned. But if they were assassins, then why were they running away at the edge of the tunnel? There was a pause. Alina's eyes flickered toward the spot where Kale had been lying before the healers carried him away. She swallowed hard, because they failed, because someone fought back. Her hands clenched slightly at her sides as the realization sank in. We were that close to being attacked. We could have died, all of us. She glanced at the others around her, all of them unharmed. Safe. And Kale. He stopped it, she whispered. He faced him. He fought one of them alone, and he saved us. Another student whispered softly, so we didn't even know we were in danger. And Kale already took the hit for all of us. Damn, someone muttered. We owe him. Alina's chest tightened, and she took a slow breath. But that doesn't mean we should forget the others who fought too. Like Edwin, who faced one of them alone, Professor Elysia, and the rest of Group 2. We should thank them as well. We never even knew. While we were running around thinking it was just a normal dungeon quest, he was out there, protecting us from the shadows. She looked back one last time at the tunnel. Thank you, Kale, she said under her breath. No one answered, but the silence around her was filled with quiet respect. The crowd stood a little taller, spoke a little softer, because now they knew the truth. Then someone among the crowd said, If I were strong, I would have killed all those bastards myself. The words, though angry, were met with silence. Some students looked down at the ground. Others looked at Kale, still breathing, still alive despite it all, and felt something they hadn't felt before. Respect and fear. The quiet student they had once ignored or overlooked had just fought for his life, and won. As the group passed through the final gate leading out of the dungeon, a soft breeze from the surface brushed against their skin. Above them, the skies over Arcadia Academy had turned cloudy, as if the heavens themselves reflected the weight of what had just happened below. Back at the academy, the infirmary. So when they carried Kale near the gates of Arcadia Academy, the floating stretcher surrounded by glowing runes, all eyes turned toward them. Second-year and third-year students, who had been training in the Ground 1 and Ground 2, paused mid-swing and mid-spell as they caught sight of the incoming group. Whispers broke out instantly. There, that's the first year, right? Wait, is that someone carrying? Is he unconscious? A third-year boy watches with a bored expression. TCH, those bunch of losers. I knew they'd mess something up. One of his friends nodded. They got attacked? Seriously? During a dungeon quest. The boy smirked. If that were me, I would have taken down all of them. Assassins or not, I wouldn't be lying on some stretcher like a broken doll. Another student nearby added sarcastically, Yeah, sure. You're all talk until you're the one facing them. The cocky third year glared but said nothing, and they all turned their attention back to the scene unfolding before them. Kale was still unconscious, his face pale, lips dry, and his body unmoving. Second-year students whispered as they watched the assassins being carried behind, tightly bound in magical chains, their mouths sealed with glowing magic. Wait, those are real assassins. From where? Why were they sent against first years? Why didn't we hear anything about this? No wonder that person is like that. Did he fight one of them? By the time the group finally returned to the academy, The infirmary was already prepared. A team of healers in white robes stood waiting near the gates. Their robes shimmered with glowing sigils, pulsing softly with mana. Several magical scrolls floated in the air beside them, already activated, ready to be used at any moment. As soon as the stretcher carrying Kale appeared, one of the senior healers stepped forward with urgency. "Bring him in quickly. There's no time to waste," she commanded. The stretcher wasn't ordinary. It was crafted with mana-infused wood, gliding smoothly across the ground on invisible rails powered by magic. It floated just above the floor, moving swiftly through the academy's stone halls as students and staff watched in silence. A full medical team was waiting. They immediately surrounded Kale, working in perfect coordination. Some began placing mana stabilizers around the bed, crystal pillars that glowed softly and helped control Kale's vital energy. Others cast diagnostic spells, their hands weaving through the air as glowing symbols formed and disappeared. A gentle hum of magic filled the room as they pressed their hands over Kale's body, sending soothing waves of healing energy into his most injured areas. One of the head healers, a middle-aged man with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes, placed a mana seal over Kale's chest, a glowing circle that pulsed with Kale's weak heartbeat. He let out a slow breath, then spoke. "He's badly injured, internal bleeding, mana exhaustion, fractured ribs, but..." He looked up at the others firmly. "He's still breathing. He's alive, just barely. We don't know if he'll wake up soon, but we'll do everything we can." Everyone nodded and got to work because every second mattered. More spells lit up around him. A glowing crystal orb hovered above his head, glowing brighter with each pulse of his heartbeat. Outside the room, some of the students who weren't allowed and stood in small groups, still whispering. "Why would someone try to kill us? Is it because we are students? Who is he really?" Even some of the professors had started gathering, talking quietly among themselves, trying to make sense of what had happened. And through all the noise, one thought echoed in the minds of nearly every student. Kale wasn't just another quiet first year. Something had changed, and whatever secrets he carried, whatever powers he was hiding, this was only the beginning. As soon as Kale was placed in the infirmary and the healers began treating him, the principal called for an emergency staff meeting. A messenger quickly ran through the academy halls, notifying all professors, security, and important staff members. Within minutes, they gathered inside the main conference chamber, a large, rows of seats arranged in a circle. The principal stood at the center, his face serious and voice calm, but heavy with urgency. "One of our students has been badly injured," he began, "and this is not an isolated case. We must act." Meanwhile, the 3 captured assassins, the ones who had attacked during the dungeon operation, were being held under tight security. Although Arcadia Academy didn't have a prison, they had prepared a secure chamber deep beneath the academy, originally meant for dangerous magical artifacts and runaway beasts. Now, that chamber had been converted into a temporary holding cell. The assassins were locked inside, their hands bound with enchanted chains and mouths sealed with magic runes to prevent them from speaking or casting any spells. Guards stood watch outside the door in shifts, fully armed and alert. The situation was tense. Everyone in the academy, from students to professors, could feel it. Something was wrong. Something dangerous was brewing. What had started as a simple dungeon test had just turned into a story that would shake the entire academy. Around the academy, they stood in silence. Some of the second-year students murmured among themselves. Even the arrogant students who had mocked moments ago suddenly stood quiet. "Still, why did it happen to him?" one muttered under his breath. "Why not me? I wish I had the chance. I would have killed all of them myself." But even he didn't sound so confident now. Not after seeing Kale's burned, bloody state and knowing he was still alive after such an explosion. One second-year girl murmured, "Maybe it didn't happen to you because you wouldn't have survived." More students joined in, watching the group enter the academy building. Word spread like wildfire across the state of Elysia. There were 12 major academies in the state, and within hours, every single one had heard the shocking news about Arcadia Academy. The incident whatever truly happened, had become the hottest topic across students, teachers, and guilds. Outside the gates of Arcadia, reporters began to gather. The reporters crowded the entrance, throwing questions at the security. One reporter said demanded, "This is already the second incident. What exactly is going on inside? Is the Academy hiding something?" They refer to the recent chaos, a dungeon attack, assassins infiltrating and injuring students. No one had all the details, but everyone had their own version of the story. Soon, rumors filled the streets of Elysia. 2 major incidents in just a few months? That's not normal. If this continues, something might be brewing inside Arcadia. This can't be just bad luck. Someone's behind it. Inside the academy walls, the mood had changed completely. A heavy tension hung in the air. While first-year students walked around, the second and third-year students watched them with narrowed eyes and clenched jaws. Their feelings were clear: jealousy, resentment, and frustration. Why are the first years getting all the spotlight? Back when we were first years, we never had the media swarming our gates or professors praising us like that. They couldn't stand the fact that the youngest students were now being recognized by guild scouts too, respected by upperclassmen, and whispered about by the world. Some felt challenged. Others felt forgotten. The staff meeting room. The staff meeting room was filled with tension. A long oval table sat at the center, surrounded by professors, department heads, and academy officials. He glanced at the reports spread before him, then looked up at the gathered staff. "This is the second serious incident involving assassins," he said slowly. "If this goes on, we'll be forced to take drastic action. Something must be done." A heavy silence followed. His eyes then turned sharply toward one person in the room. "If this goes on, we'll be forced to take drastic action. Something must be done." A heavy silence followed. His eyes then turned sharply toward one person in the room. "Elysia, where were you when our students were in danger?" he asked. Professor Elysia sat stiffly in her chair. Her shoulders trembled slightly as she stood up and bowed her head. I failed in my duty as their guide," she said quietly. "I take full responsibility. If needed, I'm willing to resign. I deserve to be expelled from this position." A murmur spread across the room. The head of the department raised his hand. "There's no need for that, Elysia," he said firmly. "We are all responsible. None of us predicted this attack. Don't blame yourself alone." Another professor, older and dressed in deep blue robes, leaned forward. "Regardless, we must report this to the royal government," he said. "This is no longer an internal matter. The Academy's reputation is at risk." Someone else scoffed quietly from the end of the table. "The government?" he muttered. "They don't give a damn unless gold is involved. We're on our own." The room fell silent again. The meeting went on and ended after 4 hours with the conclusion: "Show no mercy to those whoever they interfere." And then they all dispersed talking with each other. On the next day, the Hollow Sanctum. The Hollow Sanctum is a secret and forbidden place hidden deep beneath the world's surface, far away from the eyes of kingdoms, temples, or guilds. It is a chamber made of dark stone, where no sunlight reaches there. The Hollow Sanctum is located in each city of the state, but no normal human can see that unless you sign a contract to serve under demons. The Hollow Sanctum was forged by the Abyss Warden himself, and he now serves as its eternal king. This is the place where devil contractors, humans or demons who have made pacts with powerful evil forces, gather to issue commands. These contractors serve the demon lords and act as their messengers in the human world. Inside the Hollow Sanctum, they give secret missions to hired assassins, mercenaries, or corrupted cultists. Most of the orders involve assassinations, destroying, eliminating certain chosen ones before they awaken their true powers. Assassins come here to receive their dark contracts. Once the deal is made, there's no turning back. Breaking the contract means death, or worse. When they achieve a contract, they will get paid a huge amount. No one is allowed to speak loudly in the Hollow Sanctum. Voices should be low, and every step feels watched. So after failing their mission, the 7 assassins came back to the Hollow Sanctum. They were sent to kill uprising heroes, but things didn't go as planned. Now, they had to face the ones who had hired them and explain why they had failed. Their footsteps were heavy, and their hearts full of fear, knowing that failure in this place often meant death. Their mission, to kill all the students and disrupt the Academy's trial, had ended in disaster. 3 of them had been captured. 1 student had barely survived. And now, all 7 had been returned to this place to expand the contract. A person slowly stepped out from the shadows. He made it hard to breathe just by being there. He was covered in black smoke and ash, so no one could clearly see his body. When he walked, there was no sound. His face was hidden behind a broken mask with no expression at all. This was no ordinary being. This was a shadow disciple, a being born of darkness, trained by the demons themselves, and forged through centuries of war and blood. He stood tall, arms behind his back, staring down at the kneeling assassins like insects. Without a word, he walked toward the first assassin. "Do you know what it feels like to fail?" the shadow disciple asked. "To betray the trust of your contractor? To bring shame upon the name of darkness? You know I don't waste my presence on stray dogs. And you're not even worth that." The assassin trembled. Please. I didn't mean. SHHCK. Before he could finish, the shadow disciple reached forward. With a flick of his clawed hand, the assassin's neck twisted violently. His body collapsed, lifeless. 1 down. The disciple turned to the second. All the assassins were scared. You were trained to be unseen, to be death in silence. And yet, you let them live. The assassin gritted his teeth. "We were ambushed. The students had help." "Excuses," the disciple whispered. A shadow blade slipped from his sleeve. In one swift motion, it slid across the assassin's throat. Silent, clean, and cold. 2 down. He moved to the third. "Would you beg for your life if they caught you?" he asked, voice venomous. "Would you cry out like a child? You know I like people screaming in pain." The third assassin remained silent, head bowed. For a moment, the disciple stood still. Then, he placed a single finger on the assassin's forehead. A black rune began to burn into his skin. The assassin screamed. His body convulsed violently, then fell backward, blood running from every orifice. 3 down. Now the fourth. "Do you know what happened 200 years ago?" the shadow disciple asked as he knelt to eye level. "I was like you, human, arrogant, proud." He chuckled softly, bitterly. "But I was chosen. I transcended. I served the demon lords, and I killed 27 top-ranked heroes across the continent, and I didn't fail. I didn't beg. I didn't hide." The fourth assassin tried to crawl away, shaking. He didn't move. Suddenly, a black smoke came out from his cloak, wrapped around the assassin's neck, and pulled him into the darkness behind. "Ahhhhhhh," the assassin screamed. 4 down. To the fifth, he whispered, "Do you think death will be mercy for you?" The assassin whimpered, tears flowing. "I didn't want to come. I was forced. We're all forced to serve. The strong accept it. The weak die screaming." The disciple raised his hand, and the shadows around them twisted, rising like spears. With a snap of his fingers, they pierced the fifth assassin from every direction, lifting his body into the air before dropping it with a wet thud. 5 down. The sixth shook violently. He screamed, "Please, I can do it again. I can. You had your chance." The disciple raised his foot and crushed the assassin's skull beneath his boot with no hesitation. 6 down. The shadow disciple walked through the blood-stained chamber, the echo of his steps, the only sound that remained. 6 had fallen. Only 1 remained. He came to a halt before the last assassin, a trembling boy who looked no older than 20. His face was pale, eyes were wide with terror, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. His hands were still bound, and he backed up until he hit the cold stone behind him. I didn't even kill anyone," the boy blurted, voice cracking. "I swear, I was just following orders. I only watched the others. I didn't touch a soul." The shadow disciple said nothing at first. His gaze was calm and unreadable. Then he spoke. "Do you think that makes you innocent? You entered the circle of darkness. Willingly. You may not have drawn blood, but you stood with those who did. Then why did you come up for the contract?" The disciple stepped forward. Then, suddenly, he leaned in closer than before. "Then be reborn. He lifted his hand and touched 2 fingers to the boy's chest. Suddenly, something strange happened. A dark symbol began to appear under the boy's skin, right where the shadow disciple had touched him. It spread quickly, like black veins crawling across his chest and arms. The boy's eyes grew wide with shock. He didn't understand what was happening, but then the pain hit. He opened his mouth and let out a scream, loud, raw, and filled with fear, like something dark and powerful had been awakened inside his body. Something old, something terrifying, something he couldn't control. What is wrong with this weird boy? What is happening to him? I didn't do anything, though. The other assassins had been killed. This one was different. He was being changed. The shadow disciple slowly pulled his hand away from the boy's chest. The dark veins that had spread across the boy's body began to fade. Soon, there was no trace left, just a faint glow of something hidden beneath the surface. The boy remained kneeling, trembling and breathing hard. Sweat ran down his face. His hands clenched the floor, trying to stay upright. But he stood calm, even though he was feared. The shadow disciple turned, his cloak beginning to sweep behind him as he walked away, ready to leave this one behind. But then, a voice broke the silence. It would be an honor to die by your hand. The shadow disciple froze mid-step. His head tilted slightly, just enough to show that he had heard. He didn't turn around right away. He stood still, as if replaying the boy's words in his mind. This wasn't a plea for mercy. It wasn't begging or crying. It was a calm, sincere request, one made not in fear, but with acceptance. Slowly, the shadow disciple turned to face him again. The shadow disciple's eyes narrowed just a little. Something had changed in his face. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope. Not anger, no pity, surprise. He turned back fully and faced the boy again. "You're not like the others," he murmured softly under his breath, almost to himself. The boy lifted his head slowly. His body still trembled, but something had shifted in his eyes. Yes, there was fear, but it wasn't the only thing. There was willpower, the strength to face death. There was submission, not out of weakness, but from accepting the path he had chosen. And above all, there was acceptance, a calm, quiet readiness to meet his end with honor. Most beg for their lives, the shadow disciple thought. But you ask for death with dignity. That takes strength. Then the shadow disciple reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, skill fragment. It pulsed with a dark light, pure, concentrated power in its rawest form. He held it out. "This is a fragment of Umbra Fong, a skill forged in the abyss. Few can handle its madness. But if you survive, you will become something far greater." The boy stared at it, unsure whether to take it or fear it. The shadow disciple looked down at the boy one last time. "Complete the task," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Serve in silence. Do not ask questions. Do not seek justice. Just prove that you are worthy, and your reward will be big." He reached into the folds of his dark cloak and pulled out a strange shard, the skill of fragment. The energy it gave off was cold and dark, as if it carried a piece of the abyss itself. Without another word, he dropped the fragment into the boy's open hand. The moment it touched his skin, the boy felt a strange chill. "If you survive its awakening," the disciple continued, his voice lower now, almost like a warning, "you will never be the same again." Then, without waiting for a reply, the shadow disciple turned away. His dark cloak moved around him like smoke. With every step he took, his body became harder to see. Soon, he completely disappeared into the shadows at the edge of the room. One by one, his footsteps grew quieter, until everything was silent. The assassin stayed there, kneeling on the cold ground, completely still. In his palm, the dark fragment continued to glow, sending soft pulses up his arm, like a slow heartbeat. He stared at it, unsure what to feel. Had he been spared, or had he been claimed? He didn't know. But one thing was clear in his heart. He no longer belonged to himself. He now belonged to the shadow. 6 corpses lay in silence. One had been claimed for something darker. He turned toward the watching shadows, figures far beyond mortal understanding, and knelt. "I have cleansed the filth, Lord. Their failure will not repeat." From deep within the sanctum, a voice answered. It was slow, rumbling, ancient. Good. The time draws near. The pieces are moving, and all the heroes around the nations must not live long enough to become what we fear. The shadow disciple bowed his head. As you command. Elysia, at home, her room. Elysia sat on the edge of her bed, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes full of frustration. I wish he would just die already, she muttered angrily, staring at the wall. Why would anyone even try to help him? She had barely left her room in the past 2 days. The silence in the house only made her thoughts louder. She lay down again, staring up at the ceiling, her mind filled with images of him. Her mother knocked on the door and opened it slightly, voice worried. Elysia, come down. Dinner is ready? Elysia didn't answer. Her heart was burning with hatred and conflict. She couldn't get him out of her head. He's weak now, injured. This might be my only chance. Her eyes narrowed coldly. If I don't do it now, I might never get another shot. I should kill him while he's still in this state. At the academy. Interrogation. 3 assassins knelt on the cold floor. Heavy chains bound their wrists and ankles, glowing faintly with suppression runes. Their heads were bowed, faces bruised and bloodied. Behind them stood 2 stern academy guards armed and alert. At the other end of the room stood the principal of Arcadia Academy. Beside him stood 5 professors. The air was silent, broken only by the shallow, shaky breaths of the assassins. The principal stepped forward. You will not escape alive unless you tell us the truth, he said in a threatening voice. Speak. Now. One of the assassins, a man with a deep scar across his neck, slowly raised his head. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He let out a tired breath, but remained silent. Then one of the professors leaned forward. Professor Treneth stepped forward slowly. With calm hands, he reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small leather pouch. He placed it on the table in front of the assassins. Clink! The sound echoed faintly as the pouch hit the hard wooden surface. It was slightly open, just enough for the golden shimmer inside to be seen. Dozens of gold coins were packed tightly within, catching the light of the lanterns and gleaming like treasure. Everyone's eyes flicked toward the pouch, even the assassins. The youngest of the 3, whose face was pale and scratched, stared at the coins for a second too long. Professor Treneth crossed his arms and looked at them seriously. There was a hint of urgency behind it. We'll pay you double, he said. This is only a part of what you'll receive if you talk. Names, locations, orders, anything. Just help us understand what you're involved in. He leaned slightly forward. Tell us the truth, and I promise, your life won't be meaningless. You can help stop more blood from being spilled. The room fell silent again. The gold at there untouched. The assassins glanced at one another. A long pause followed. The old man with the scar on his neck kept his gaze down. The one with the hollow eyes closed them completely, as if trying to shut the world out. And the youngest? He bit his lip, his eyes flickering between the pouch and the professor's. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. They remained still. No answer. Then finally, the youngest of the 3, barely older than the academy students, whispered, You don't understand. The guards glanced at each other, and Aldrich gave a subtle nod, signaling them to let the assassins speak freely. His voice was barely more than a whisper. We didn't want to be part of this, he said, his wide eyes flicking between the professors. We are just pawns. The room stayed silent. No one interrupted. Even the head of the department remained still, watching him like a hawk. We were told what to do, and we did it. That's all. The assassin's hands clenched into fists. But the real power, it's not with us. It's something else. Something big. Something far beyond your imagination. His voice cracked slightly. Even we don't know everything. Most of it is kept hidden from us. We only follow the orders they give. Professor Treneth leaned forward from his chair, and his eyes were intense and focused. Who gives those orders? The assassin slowly shook his head. We never see them. We don't even know their names. We only heard whispers. What kind of whispers? The professor asked quickly. Did they ever mention a leader? A location? The assassin nodded slowly. They call themselves the Demon Organization. Gasps echoed faintly from some of the professors. Even the more seasoned ones exchanged glances. Professor Treneth frowned. That name hasn't been heard in years. The assassin's voice grew more strained. They're not a myth. They're real. They have people everywhere. Cities, guilds, even some noble houses. Professor Barlow slammed a hand on the table, making the pouch of gold jump. Nonsense. That's just a rumor used to scare students into behaving. But the principal said, let him finish. We were warned never to speak their name. They don't show their faces. They don't need to. When they want something done, it happens. When someone disobeys, they disappear. The middle assassin, who had been silent the entire time, spoke now in a gravelly voice. They call the leader the Demon Lord. No one knows who or what he is. Only that those who meet him don't live to speak of it. The professor narrowed his eyes. Then how do you know he exists? Because we heard the rumors, the young assassin whispered. There was a long pause. Then continued. They were summoning something. A creature. A shadow beast. But we fled before we could see it. Head of the department turned to his fellow professors. This is worse than we thought. But just as the assassin opened his mouth again, perhaps to reveal more, something strange happened. Principal Aldrich, killing those assassins is useless unless we find out who the hell is Demon Lord. Then one of the professors, his face twisted, his eyes widened in horror. He reached toward his throat, gasping. No, wait. Then suddenly he screamed. Blood came out his mouth. His body twisted in pain. A moment later, the other two assassins also screamed and shook uncontrollably. What's happening? Professor Treneth shouted, rushing forward. Are they dying? Someone said. Is it poison? No, said one of the professors. It's a seal, a death trigger. But deep behind the group, one professor silently stepped back into the shadows, his hand still faintly glowing from the snap he made moments ago. And no one saw it. Professor Elra narrowed her eyes. The demon organization? Are you saying it's real? The older assassin finally spoke in a raspy tone, his voice like sand scraping stone. Realer than you think, he said. We've seen things, rituals, forbidden spells, creatures not of this world. Because we have been working under a devil contractor for 3 years. He paused, his eyes darting to the floor as if afraid the shadows themselves might be listening. And behind it all, suddenly, the youngest assassin gasped. Gush! Blood spilled from his mouth. His body arched violently, as if an unseen force had struck him in the chest. What's happening? One of the professors shouted. They're dying, another said. Oh! The second assassin screamed in pain, grabbing his throat with both hands. His chains shook wildly as he rolled and kicked on the floor. Professor Treneth stepped forward, panic in his voice. Did they cast a spell? Head of a department clenched his fist. They were silenced, just as they were about to speak. He glanced slowly around the room, which means someone didn't want us to hear it. He paused, eyes flickering nervously toward every corner of the room. Behind it all is someone they refer to as the Demon Lord. There was a stir among the professors. Professor Treneth glanced toward the principal. The room grew even colder, as if the name itself had summoned a dark presence. Tell us everything you know about the Demon Lord, Aldrich said quickly, stepping closer. The assassins hesitated, their mouths opened, about to speak more, to finally reveal the truth behind the shadowy figure. But in that instant, something subtle happened. The professor, standing quietly near the back, made the smallest of gestures. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers softly, barely audible. No one seemed to notice, but the effect was immediate. The young assassin suddenly gasped. His back arched violently as a pained cry escaped his lips. Then the second assassin, his eyes widened in terror as he clawed at his throat, choking and shaking. The chains rattled as he collapsed to the ground. The third tried to say something, anything, but only blood came out of his mouth. Their bodies convulsed, one after the other, as invisible magic tore through their insides. Agony twisted across their faces as they screamed, but only for a moment. And then all three fell silent. Dead. Not a single spell had been cast aloud. No rune activated. No one moved, except Professor, who now looked forward with a composed expression, his hands behind his back. The silence that followed was heavier than before. A few professors exchanged looks, some in shock, others in quiet understanding. What just happened? Professor Elysia whispered, though her voice trembled. They're dead, Professor confirmed grimly, walking over to check the bodies. Poison? Curse? No, Caldrain said flatly, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the corpses. It was a death seal, likely planted in them by their higher-ups. If they spoke too much, it would activate. But deep down, even he wasn't sure if that was entirely true. Behind him, a professor gave a faint smile, barely visible. Aldrich turned to the rest. This confirms it. We're dealing with something far darker than we assumed. A demon organization, and a possible demon lord behind it all. The room grew colder. Even the bravest among them felt a faint shiver crawl down their spine. Double the security, Aldrich said, and keep this entire incident quiet. As the professors filed out, one by one of the professors lingered for a moment beside the corpses. He looked down at them silently. Then, with a flick of his finger, the corpses vanished into smoke, leaving behind no trace. Principal Aldrich slowly rose from his chair. Dressed in deep blue robes with silver linings, the insignia of Arcadia Academy glowing faintly on his chest, he placed both hands on the table and looked at the faces of those vanishing assassins. The students are our future, he said clearly, be it the students from within our own academy or those who come from other nations. It does not matter where they were born or which language they speak. When they enter these gates of all the academies to learn and grow, they become part of our world, our responsibility. Aldrich continued, his gaze unwavering. And in that case, he said, we shall begin a formal meeting with the 12 academies of this state. This is no longer a concern limited to Arcadia alone. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. Because what we face now, this threat, these assassins, this shadow creeping into our halls, it will not only harm our students, his tone sharpened, but it will spread to others, to every academy in this state, perhaps even beyond its borders. Professor Treneth leaned forward. Are you suggesting an inter-academy alliance? Aldrich nodded. I am. We must not be divided in times like these. If the students are in danger, from within or without, then we must act together, share knowledge, pool resources, and defend what truly matters, their lives, their futures. Professor Elra exhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing. This is the first time in decades such a meeting will be called. Are we prepared for what it may bring? Aldrich looked toward the window for a brief moment, then back to the room. Prepared or not, we must act. Silence and delay will only let the darkness grow stronger. The room fell silent again, but this time, the silence carried purpose. The meeting will begin. On the next day, start of new week, the sunlight gently streamed through the windows of Arcadia Academy, casting warm, golden light onto the stone floors and open training fields. Outside, students had already begun to gather, chatting with friends and getting ready for the new week ahead. The academy grounds were filled with the busy sounds of footsteps and practice weapons clashing during early morning drills. But deep inside the academy, far from the noise and bustle, something different was happening. In the administrative wing, where important decisions were made, a secret meeting had been arranged. Principal Aldrich had called it quietly, without making any announcements to the students or posting any notices for the general staff. There were no bells, no memos, just silent messages passed among those who needed to know. Only professors were invited. It wasn't a normal staff meeting. As word of the closed-door meeting spread through the halls, a strange stillness followed it. Professors who received the invitation wore serious expressions, and those left out could only guess what it was about. It was about the meeting with all the academies of the entire lair state. The students, busy with their morning classes and training drills, had no idea what was about to happen beyond the usual lessons. Back on the academy grounds, students started to notice something unusual. None of the professors were around. The classrooms were empty, the training fields lacked supervision, and even the usual patrols of faculty members through the corridors were gone. Whispers started to spread among the students. Something was definitely off. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment, every professor had been summoned elsewhere. At the exact hour set by the message, all of Arcadia Academy's professors, regardless of rank or subject, gathered quietly in a large, private room located deep within the administrative wing. It was Principal Aldrich's personal meeting room, used only for the most serious matters. The atmosphere inside was tense and quiet. A large table stood at the center, and the professors took their seats, exchanging glances but saying little. At the head of the room stood Principal Aldrich. When the room had gone completely silent, he stepped forward and addressed everyone. "I have called this meeting to discuss the important matters," he said. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each professor. "The recent events on and around our academy grounds are not isolated incidents," he continued. "We are not simply dealing with rebellious students or rogue outsiders. This is something bigger, a threat that reaches beyond Arcadia's walls." A quiet murmur passed through the room. Some professors frowned, others exchanged concerned looks. Principal Aldrich raised his hand, calming the room again. "We must be vigilant," he said, "and we must be united. The days ahead will test all of us." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "Therefore, we will convene a meeting of all the academic staff across the state, the 12 academies of Elysia. This will be a gathering of minds, a union of strength." Murmurs spread among the professors. Such a meeting had not been held in many decades, and the very idea carried both hope and worry. "But this must remain confidential," Aldrich continued. "We cannot risk spreading panic among the students or the public. For now, only our trusted faculty members will be informed and involved. The students will continue their training as usual. Their focus must not be disturbed." Professors nodded sincerely. "Understood, Principal Aldrich. We will keep this secret and act swiftly." The professors exchanged looks, aware of the responsibility that lay before them. They knew that whatever was coming, it would affect not only their own academy, but every corner of the state's educational institutions. Soon, the hallways of Arcadia grew quiet of faculty footsteps as all the professors and staff departed together. They left the classrooms and training grounds behind, where the students remained, studying, sparring, and practicing magic, unaware of the meeting. But while the academy hummed with youthful energy and determination, the heart of Arcadia, the professors and leaders, had moved beyond. Most students went about their day, as usual, unaware of anything. But a few started to notice the odd silence, the missing professors, the lack of authority, the way senior staff avoided questions. Whispers began to spread among those paying close attention. Some murmured of a secret meeting, held behind closed doors. Others guessed it might be related to the recent dangers. But no one could confirm anything. No official word was given. No announcements were made. To most, it was just another day. At the same time, far away from the bright lights and tall towers of the academy, something else was moving in the darkness. Just outside the city walls, a young assassin crouched quietly on the rooftop of an old, broken-down building. He was shaking, but not because he was cold. His breathing was rough and uneven. His chest rose and fell quickly, like something strange was happening inside him, or something hidden was starting to wake up. He was holding something in his hand. This was no ordinary item. It was a skill fragment, a piece of forbidden power. The moment he pressed the fragment into his skin and let it merge with his body, everything inside him changed. It felt like a violent storm had erupted within. Dark energy rushed through his veins like fire, wild and uncontrollable. His heart pounded. His muscles tightened. His thoughts became strange, violent. Everything he had once known or believed began to twist. His instincts had sharpened. His fear disappeared. Something savage. His eyes flickered strangely, as though he was no longer fully human. And in his mind, only one word repeated, louder and louder, like a drumbeat of madness. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" It was the skill of madness. He gritted his teeth, trying to hold back the urge, but it was useless. The hunger for violence had already taken root. The hatred burned in his eyes. Then, breaking the heavy silence, he spoke. "Those damn insects! Today, you'll all meet your demise." And just like that, he heads toward the Arcadia Academy. The moment he activated the fragment, everything felt wild and violent. The energy inside, it wasn't calm, rather it was rough, aggressive, and hard to control. His vision became blurry. He couldn't see things around him clearly anymore. It was like a thick fog had entered his mind. All he could feel was rage, a burning hatred toward the heroes around all the academy. His fists clenched tightly as he growled through his teeth. "All those damn insects. I'll kill them all." Then suddenly, a burst of cold fire shot through his mind. His body shook. The world around him started to twist. Shapes bent strangely, and the colors of everything faded into dark shades and shadows. It felt like the world had lost its light. His heart began to pound like a war drum, louder and faster, until it echoed in his ears. Then he heard a voice, not his own, a cruel, sharp, and heartless voice. It whispered like a curse, repeating over and over again, "Kill, kill, kill." The voice was unfeeling and insane. It scratched at his mind, trying to take control. This was the true power of the fragment, the skill of madness. This dark skill was no ordinary power. It originated from demons. Long ago, demons created this type of power not for demons, but for demon beasts. It was meant to turn those creatures into brutal weapons, to help them hunt, kill, and destroy other beasts during wars between the heroes. Some demons had personal beasts, trained monsters they raised and used in battle. When the skill of madness was activated inside those beasts, they became unstoppable killers, even able to defeat heroes. That's why some demon beasts were even stronger than powerful heroes. And now, that same skill was inside him. A human. The assassin's body trembled from the overwhelming power. He was no longer thinking like a person. He was thinking like a beast trained to do only one thing: kill everything in its path. The young assassin's eyes snapped open, now blazing with a wild. His movements became jerky, almost animalistic. His breath came faster, sharper. His limbs twitched violently as the power of madness took hold. It was the skill of madness, a cursed gift from the demon forces designed to break minds and shatter wills. The fragment gave strength beyond measure, but it twisted the soul, warping thoughts into a singular, violent focus. His lips curled into a savage grin, revealing clenched teeth stained with dried blood. He no longer felt fear or doubt. The only thing real was the command pounding in his mind. "Kill, kill, kill." A cold, ruthless command echoed through his fractured mind. Head to Arcadia Academy. Eliminate all. Let no insect survive. His weapons, two slender daggers, glimmered wickedly in the broad evening. His fingers itched to draw blood, to spill it freely. "Those damn insects," he muttered under his breath, voice low and filled with venom. "Today, you will all meet your demise." There was no hesitation, no second thought. The assassin sprinted from rooftop to rooftop, running towards the academy with a high speed and rush. He ran and ran. Ha 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 colon. The city around him began to blur. Buildings twisted in his vision, bending and warping like they were melting under heat. It wasn't the city that was changing, it was him. The madness inside his mind was distorting everything. Colors faded, shapes twisted, and reality itself felt unstable. The dark, whispering voice in his head grew louder. It urged him forward, pushing him like a wild beast released from its cage. He ran through dark alleyways and narrow streets. He didn't care who saw him. Lamps flickered as he passed. People on the streets caught only a glimpse of his shadow, and it was enough. In one of the small homes near the alley, a man peered out through the window. His eyes widened in fear. The figure he saw wasn't human. It looked like a monster in human form, moving with terrifying speed. The man backed away, breath caught in his throat, and quickly shut his window in fear, whispering a prayer under his breath. Others on the street caught flashes of him too. A figure cloaked in black, eyes glowing faintly, running like the wind. They froze, heartbeats pounding, too scared to speak. Mothers pulled their children indoors. A guard nearby turned his head, but by then the assassin was already gone. His vision narrowed to a single focus. Arcadia Academy. The place where the heroes trained. The place he had come to destroy. He didn't hear the noise of the city anymore. The shouts, the footsteps, the wind, it all faded. Nothing mattered now. Only the target. He felt nothing now except for one thing. The need to kill. The heavy iron gates of the academy stood firm, guarded by armored soldiers keeping a watchful eye. But he didn't slow down. Back at the academy, the sun had already started to dip behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow over the academy grounds. With all the professors absent for the day, most students were either relaxing in their dorm and gathering in small groups to practice and gossiping about the mysterious silence from the staff. Whispers floated around, rumors about a secret meeting, danger outside the academy, and even an attack. But without any confirmation, time goes on. Among the students walking through the halls was Riku Vierhard, a well-known third-year student. With his long brown hair tied neatly behind his head and a sword strapped to his back, he walked with confidence, his boots echoing against the floors. He looked around and smirked to himself. Since there are no professors today, might as well make use of the time, he muttered, but there was always a bit of arrogance in his voice. He headed toward the first-year class building. His target? Edwin, the second strongest among the first-year students. In the first-year class, Edwin had just returned from the training field and was wiping sweat from his forehead when Riku was at the door. Isn't that Riku Vierhard? The third year, one asked, eyes widening. What's he doing here? This is the first-year class. They kept their voices low, watching with curiosity and a hint of nervousness as Riku casually leaned against the wall, waiting for Edwin. Yo, Edwin, Riku called casually, pushing the door open without waiting for a response. Edwin looked up, blinking in surprise. What are you doing here? Riku leaned against the wall with a relaxed grin. I heard the professors are all gone today. Thought I'd drop by and challenge one of the rising stars. Edwin raised a brow. A challenge. Edwin raised a brow. A challenge. Friendly match. Riku clarified, his tone playful but serious. In your personal training room. No audience, just you and me. What do you say? Edwin glanced at the others in the class. A few students perked up, eager to watch, but Riku had clearly said no audience. They made it more serious. All right. Edwin nodded after a moment. Let's go. The two left the class and headed toward Edwin's personal training room, a benefit given to top-ranked students. Meanwhile, in the infirmary. Elsewhere, in the quiet and dimly lit infirmary building, Kale lay on a soft white bed, still recovering from his recent injuries. His chest rose and fell gently as he rested, a bandage wrapped around his shoulder and another across his side. Beside him sat Cecilia. She quietly dipped a cloth into a bowl of cool water. She pressed it to Kale's forehead, even though he wasn't burning up. She just didn't know what else to do. The room was peaceful, filled only with the faint sounds of the wind brushing against the windows and the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on the wall. Cecilia looked at Kale's sleeping face. Her expression was worried. I don't know this feeling. I don't know why am I doing this, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Even when you're hurt, you still hide your pain. Kale stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Cecilia continued tending to him, and her thoughts tangled between concern and something deeper she couldn't name. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple as the evening slowly settled in. The academy grounds were quieter than usual, with no classes or professors around. Many students had already left for the day. Among them were Elysia and Jean Hladen, both walking calmly along the path that led toward the outer gates of Arcadia Academy. They had planned to go home early since the day felt unusually quiet and uneventful. As they walked side by side, chatting lightly about training and the upcoming midterms, something strange suddenly caught Elysia's eye. Her steps slowed and her smile faded. Far in the distance, just past the city rooftops, a black figure was speeding toward the academy. It moved so fast, it looked like a shadow, streaking across the wind. Alicia's eyes widened. "Hey, Jean," she said slowly, her voice tense. "What is that thing?" Jean followed his gaze, squinting against the fading sunlight. At first, he couldn't see clearly, but then his face tensed. "Huh, what the? That thing looks fierce." The black figure darted between rooftops like a predator, kicking up dust as it moved. It was fast, unnaturally fast. "Is it heading toward the academy?" Elysia asked. Jean nodded slowly. His expression was serious now. "Yes, I think it is. It's coming this way, fast." They stood still for a brief second, watching the figure race closer with every heartbeat. Then Elysia grabbed Jin's arm. "Let's hurry. We need to go back to the academy now." Without wasting another moment, the two of them turned around and sprinted back down the path, heading toward the gates as fast as their legs could carry them. Back inside the academy grounds, things were strangely still. Most of the top-ranked students from the second and third years had already gone home, taking the day off due to the absence of the professors. Others had returned early to their dorm rooms, planning to rest. At Valenwald Academy, the sun cast golden light through the grand windows of Valenwald Academy's central hall, a towering structure of white stone and elegant arches, decorated with glowing enchantments and banners bearing the academy's crest. Valenwald Academy was the third-best hero school in the world. It was known for its strong history, powerful mages, and top sword fighters. But people always compared it to Arcadia Academy, which was number one. Inside the council chamber of Valenwald Academy, the atmosphere was serious. The large hall was grand, with high ceilings, magical lights floating near the crystal chandeliers, and enchanted murals on the walls that moved slightly, showing past heroic battles and great victories of the academy. In the center of the room stood a massive round table made of obsidian, smooth and black like polished glass. 11 principals were seated around it, each wearing formal robes that matched the color and symbol of their department. Each of these principals led a major branch of the academy, such as magic, sword arts, defense tactics, healing, and alchemy. They had gathered today for something far more serious. One chair, however, remained empty. It belonged to Principal Rowan, head of the Beast Arts Academy. His seat was directly opposite the head principal's. His absence was quietly noticed by all, but no one said anything yet. Some exchanged quick glances, but the meeting continued without addressing it. All around the circular room, the outer walls were lined with over 62 professors. They stood at attention, some with their hands behind their backs, others with arms crossed. A few of them stood quietly, watching. Others leaned slightly toward their friend, whispering opinions and thoughts under their breath. Some professors didn't agree with each other. Some supported bold action, while others preferred caution. There were also those who didn't trust the motives of other academies, especially Arcadia Academy, the top-ranked institution in the world. Tension flowed just beneath the surface. And with what was about to be discussed, that tension was only growing stronger. At the head of the table stood Principal Elric Dernhold, one of the academics' principals. He raised a hand to silence the low murmur of conversation. "Shall we begin the purpose of the meeting today?" he said. "Let us first address our primary concern, Arcadia Academy's recent proposal." A slight shift rippled through the room. Some professors crossed their arms. Others rolled their eyes. From one of the seats, Principal Lysandra Vale, head of Arcane Combat, spoke first. "They've sent proposals already, haven't they?" she said, tone sharp. Elric nodded. "Yes. Principal Aldrich of Arcadia Academy has once again requested alliance and cooperation regarding the suspected demon organization they've been tracking. He claims the demon lord himself is involved." Elric slowly stood up from his seat with calm. "Everyone," he began. "Principal Aldrich of Arcadia Academy has reached out again. This is the third formal meeting in almost a decade, and he is formally requesting an alliance and our corporation." Some of the professors glanced up with eyebrows raised. Elric continued. "According to the report he sent, Arcadia's investigators have been tracking a secretive group operating in the shadows. They believe this organization is not only involved in several recent attacks, but may be connected to the demon forces. He paused, waiting for the next thing to say. And now Principal Aldrich claims there's a demon known as the Demon Lord who himself is involved. For a moment there was silence. Then some began to murmur. That's absurd, someone said loudly. The Demon Lord? Are they serious? Another said, clearly unconvinced. Are they joking? Throwing a fight against the strong heroes of the nation. One professor leaned forward. Who even is the Demon Lord? No one has seen or heard about his existence for over a century. How can we believe such a wild claim? Another professor added under his breath, Arcadia always makes it sound like the world revolves around them. Several around him nodded and whispered in agreement. Then, from the far end of the table, one professor chuckled. Principal Jareth Vaughn leaned forward, a man with a deep scar running down to the left side of his face. Arcadia Academy, he said, is already the top-ranked academy across all nations. They have nearly 100 elite-ranked heroes teaching as a staff. Some of them used to lead armies. That place isn't just an academy. It is a fortress in disguise. And now, you want our help? Is that a joke? Strong's asking help from others. Then Jareth Vaughn leaned back in his seat. Principal Aldrich, I am not asking for help. We seek cooperation if in case there are things that we can't handle. Maybe we should join hand in needs. Some professors shook their heads in agreement, but many of them leaned back looking frustrated. A new voice came up, or perhaps, he said, this time, the fire is real. Everyone's eyes turned to the voice. Or perhaps, because the fire is real. Some of the professors from the Arcadia Academy offered respect, bowing to the council. Valenwald Academy is a respected and powerful institution, he began saying towards the hall. None of you doubt your legacy, your strength, or your judgment. But it doesn't mean I am going against everyone's will or questioning your pride. I also agree with Arcadia's corporation. The threat we speak of is not just Arcadia's problems. It may happen to us too, because hundreds of future heroes lies in our protection. The room remained silent. The Principal Elric Dernhold spoke carefully. We have already reviewed their reports of the assassinations, but none of them has been confirmed. There is no solid proof. He stepped forward and stopped at the center of the table. Those heroes who died have died due to aging and some due to illness. There are no traces of vanishing heroes. Hence, we, the Big Hall Academy, turned down the corporation. Forgive us, but we welcome you for the student competitions at any time you need. Then one of the female professors said, Arcadia is the home to the continent's most powerful heroes with top-ranked warriors, and suddenly seeks cooperation. I will turn it down, but why do you need now? The professor who agreed spoke again, because now, he said clearly, is when it matters. He let those words hang in the air before continuing. Principal Aldrich doesn't just believe the demons are preparing to rise. He's certain of it. The signs are there. The movements, the symbols, the silence in places that should never be quiet. He turned, making sure every principal and professor saw the seriousness in his eyes. Yes, Arcadia can hold the line for a while. We have strength, resources, and trained heroes. But not even we can stand forever against what's coming. He paused, then pressed forward, his voice rising slightly with passion. But if we unite, if Valenwald and the other great academies stand with us, then we can act before the demons destroy us. His final words echoed across the marble chamber, bold and unwavering. For a few heartbeats, no one responded. But then some of the principal says, nice speech, but let's not dress it up in banners and glory. He narrowed her eyes. You speak of fighting those demons. Those demons are fake. Demons don't exist and don't make us laugh. Let's call it what it is. You're asking us to prepare our students, our children, for a battle they might never return from. Based on what exactly? Broken carvings? Ancient symbols? Disappearances and whispers in the night? Those fake demons Arcadia spoke of. Murmurs of agreement rose among several other professors. Concern and doubt spread like wildfire. Then one of the principal says, You ask for unity, he said slowly. You ask us to rally behind Arcadia's banner. But do not forget, we have our own people to look after too. Our own homes, our own students. You speak of a storm that's coming. But if you expect us to march into it with our doors wide open, you must give us more than shadows and fear. But Arcadia has never stood with us when we needed help. During the ghoul plague in the west, where were you? When Frostfall fell under siege, where was Arcadia then? Every year, we hold competitions among academics twice, and your academy always scores first. So use your heroes to kill those fake demons. Some of the professors shook their heads. We will not be Arcadia's sword, nor its shield, Jareth added. Aldrich looked around the room, sensing the mood. Let's vote, he said finally. All in favor of a temporary alliance with Arcadia Academy against the supposed demon threat? One hand rose, then another. Only 4 of the 62 professors and 11 principals raised their hands. Opposed? Elric asked. The result was clear. The head of the department of the Arcadia Academy bowed his head respectfully. And with that, they turned and walked out of the hall, leaving them in thoughtful. Rewabove.com. Clash of the Blades, Edwin versus Riku. Inside the quiet room of Edwin's personal training chamber, they stood at opposite ends, facing each other with quiet intensity. The ego you have is bigger than my stomach, said Riku. Today, I want to see how strong you are since every professor envies you. He didn't say anything. On one side stood Edwin Leonhardt, the first-year class and ranked second, a swordsman known for his precision. Opposite of him stood Riku Weierhart, the third-ranked swordsman of the third year. Tall, sharp-eyed, and lean with strength, Riku had a reputation for relentless aggression and footwork so fast that even seasoned professors found it difficult to follow. He wielded a single-edged sword with a curved blade, a style distinct from Edwin's dual-wielded straight swords. A silent nod was exchanged. Then, clang, their swords met in an explosion of sparks. Metal against metal as Edwin's sword shot out like lightning, each strike calculated to test Riku's guard. But Riku didn't retreat. He welcomed the aggression, stepping in instead of back, curving his sword to deflect Edwin's blow while twisting his hips for a counterstrike. Edwin ducked, narrowly missing the arc of Riku's blade as it sliced the air over his head. With his left hand gripping, the sword tightly rotates with a flick of the wrist, driving up into Riku's chest. But the third year shifted his footing in a blur, sidestepping as if he had predicted the move from the start. The floor trembled beneath them as both swordsmen began moving faster, their footwork circling and clashing like wolves in a deadly dance. Edwin's style was meticulous with overwhelming strength. Each motion was efficient, forged from thousands of hours of repetition. Riku, on the other hand, fought like a storm, fluid, unpredictable, fierce, with sudden bursts of overwhelming momentum. You are not weak, says Riku. Edwin slid forward and brought his swords into a spinning assault, spinning horizontally and vertically for a sweeping cut. Riku responded with a roar, parrying the first slash with brute strength and vaulting over the second with an elegant twist midair. As he landed, his boots scraped across the floor, and in that instant, his curved blade thrust out like a cobra, aiming for Edwin's shoulder. Clang! Edwin twisted just in time, crossing his swords to form a shield through rapid spinning, catching the strike. The pressure behind Riku's thrust sent shivers down Edwin's arms, but he didn't yield. I didn't think you'd be this fast, Riku said through clenched teeth. You're not slow either, said with an ego voice. Their blades separated, and the room rang with metal as they clashed again and again. Sparks rained down like falling stars. Sweat began to sheen their brows, but neither showed signs of exhaustion. Their movements grew sharper, more dangerous. Walls cracked from stray wind pressure. The mana-reactive floor began to light up with overload warnings. Both swordsmen simultaneously leapt back to gain distance. Then, as if reading each other's mind, they charged again. Riku unleashed a rapid 5-slash combo, his blade becoming a blur. Edwin countered with defensive sweeps, turning his swords into a shield of steel. He took a single half-step back to bait Riku in, then spun in a deadly arc with blades crossing like scissors. Riku grinned. Got you. He dropped low, sliding beneath the arc, and aimed an upward thrust toward Edwin's abdomen. And Edwin dropped his right sword down and kicked it up with his boot. The blade flipped end over end, and Edwin caught it midair behind his back, swinging it down in a perfect slash as Riku's blade grazed his vest. A streak of blood bloomed along Riku's cheek. At the same time, a shallow cut formed along Edwin's side. Both remained frozen for a moment, breathing heavily. The grin on Riku's face widened. "Damn, you're good." Edwin nodded, one eye narrowing. "Likewise." Then, without a word, they both resumed. Steel clashed, echoed, then blurred again. They spun, struck, dodged, and countered, the room trembling with each blow. The walls glowed brighter, reacting to the chaotic mana surging around them. Their duel pushed to new heights, both swordsmen now fighting not just with skill, but willpower. A final clash erupted as both poured mana into their blades, Riku's sword igniting with wild flame, Edwin's blades glowing a soft white blue. They dashed forward, their feet launching off the floor. Their blades met in a blinding flash with a heavy sound. Boom! A deafening explosion rocked the earth as dust and debris flew high into the sky, scattering like ash from a volcanic burst. The gate of Arcadia Academy, carved from enchanted stone and layered with protective sigils, cracked apart like dried bark. Rubble burst outward in all directions, creating a wave of energy that sent nearby trees toppling and shattered the surrounding perimeter wards in an instant. The sound was heard by all the students in the academy. From the dust emerged an assassin cloaked in shadows, and his eyes were very serious. His steps were uneven, wild, like a beast no longer aware of what it once was. The assassin who activated the skill fragment, known as the skill of madness. In his mind, only a single voice echoed, "Kill, kill, kill." The skill was now in full control of him. The assassin dashed forward with inhuman speed, the wind itself unable to keep up. The path he carved through the campus was chaotic and directionless, but deadly. A single leap sent him flying through the air like a falling meteor. He landed at Ground Zero, the open training field where some first-year students had been sparring with each other. Boom! The ground caved beneath his impact. The force of his landing sent a shockwave across the training field. Students were thrown off their feet, some slammed into walls, others flung across the grass like ragdolls. Screams erupted as dirt and mana flared wildly into the air. What is that?" It came from the main gate. He just appeared. The assassin didn't speak. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the nearest student, his arm crashing into the poor boy's chest, sending him flying a dozen meters away. Another student tried to cast a barrier spell, but the assassin struck through it with a twisted blade of mana formed in his hand. The barrier cracked instantly, and the attacker was knocked unconscious before he could scream. Another student tried to cast a barrier spell, but the assassin struck through it with a twisted blade of mana formed in his hand. The barrier cracked instantly, and the attacker was knocked unconscious before he could scream. Each strike was raw power fueled by rage. All the technique and skills were gone, and there was just destruction. From the infirmary, a light breeze passed through the shattered windows. Inside, Cecilia turned sharply. What was that sound? Kale was on the edge of his bed, still recovering. Something's wrong, Cecilia thought. Another boom echoed across the sky. Distant screaming followed. Cecilia stood. The explosion. Was that sound came from the explosion? Back at the training ground, chaos reigned. More students rushed toward the sound, but the assassin spun around with unnatural speed, smashing the ground with his foot. Jagged spikes of corrupted mana erupted beneath them, knocking several students away as they tried to intercept him. Blood sprayed across the grass as two more students were struck down by a flying piece of debris. Meanwhile, Edwin and Riku, still inside Edwin's private training chamber, paused mid-clash. Their swords clanged once more before they both stepped back, breathing heavily. That explosion again, Edwin thought. Edwin narrowed his eyes. Is it his raw power? They stared at each other for a moment longer, then simultaneously turned toward the chamber exit. On the opposite end of the academy, Elysia and Jean arrived at the gate. The sight before them was horrifying. Scorch marks along the ground, shattered stone, a giant crack running down the magical barrier that once protected the Academy's entrance. Elysia's eyes widened. Someone got through. No, Jean said, drawing his blade. Something forced its way through. Far ahead of them, smoke continued to rise from the training fields. The assassin, now fully gripped by madness, stood in the center of Ground Zero, his head tilted slightly as if listening to invisible whispers. His cracked lips formed a twisted grin. More students ran. He began to walk forward slowly, dragging a dark blade forged from condensed madness behind him, leaving a trail of blackened grass in his wake. His voice, finally rising, sounded like a dozen layered whispers, all speaking in sync. I'll kill them all. And then, boom! Across from him, Riku crouched low, sword in hand, his eyes locked on Edwin with razor-sharp focus. I'm all going out now, Edwin. This is no longer just a spar. Their swords clashed, sending a sharp ring echoing through the training grounds. Riku gritted his teeth and slid back a few feet, digging his boots into the dirt to hold his ground. You are strong, Edwin. I have underestimated you. Riku muttered, wiping a thin line of blood from his lip. But I'm not going down that easily. You're strong too, Edwin replied, lifting his blade again. But this fight, I won't lose it. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. Then lights began to glow around his neck and shoulder suddenly began to pulse. The rune engraved before. One he had activated, he used it. I haven't used the skills yet, and I will use it now. A sudden gust blew outward from him, forcing nearby dust to wash away by wind. Edwin's aura changed. His once calm stance now radiated with overwhelming force. Ruined form, valor burst. Edwin's voice dropped, laced with power. His body shimmered with pale light, and his speed multiplied. Within the blink of an eye, he was upon Riku again. Clang! Riku barely managed to block, his arms shaking violently as their blades met. Sparks flew, the shockwave pushing back even the nearby spectators. Damn it! Riku's thoughts raced. His power, it's doubled, maybe even tripled. I can feel my own strength. Edwin smirked, swinging with brutal precision. Riku grunted, stepping back, narrowly avoiding another slash that grazed his shoulder. He winced but stood tall, eyes narrowed. I won't run away. Riku roared, slamming his blade into the ground for support before launching forward again. Let's see how long you can hold that form. The next few moments were chaos. Metal against metal, footwear clashing, blades spinning. Riku relied on his agility, ducking under Edwin's powerful swings, counterattacking when he saw even the slightest opening. But Edwin was relentless. His enhanced strength broke through Riku's guard again and again. His strikes felt like thunder, unstoppable and heavy. With a powerful upward slash, Edwin sent Riku flying backward. The ground cracked beneath him as he landed on his side. The dust cleared. Riku slowly got to his feet, coughing, his grip trembling around his sword. This is bad, he thought. I can't beat him like this. But I can't give up either, not from the first-year loser. He steadied himself. I never thought I'd say this, Riku muttered, raising his sword with a shaky hand. You really are a monster, Edwin. Edwin stepped forward. You are stronger than me. I just used the skill that I acquired. Just as Edwin prepared his final strike, a loud, unnatural shriek cut through the air. KBOLM. A section of the training field's outer wall exploded in a rain of stone and dust. The battle paused. Both Edwin and Riku shielded their eyes from the debris. As the dust settled, they turned toward the breach and froze. Through the cracked wall, inside the deeper training zone, they saw a brutal clash unfolding. Suddenly, an assassin burst through the broken wall, landing in the middle of the open training grounds. Their eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging unnaturally. Their mouths were twisted into wide, sickening grins, like they were enjoying some kind of twisted game. They didn't move like normal people. Their bodies jerked and darted through the air like puppets with broken strings. Their blades spun wildly, slashing at anything nearby without control. They leaped high, flipped mid-air, and crashed down again, only to jump back up instantly. It was like they felt no pain, no fear, only madness. His movements were completely erratic, unpredictable, and violent. Not human at all. In the middle of the chaos stood Jean, his body surrounded by dusts. His clothes were singed, and his fists glowed, ready to strike. Beside him stood Elysia, calm yet fierce. She held sword, one in each hand, her stance firm like a flowing. His movements were completely erratic, unpredictable, and violent. Not human at all. In the middle of the chaos stood Jean, his body surrounded by dusts. His clothes were singed, and his fists glowed, ready to strike. Beside him stood Elysia, calm yet fierce. She held sword, one in each hand, her stance firm like a flowing river ready to flood. Despite the danger, Alicia's eyes were sharp. She dodged an assassin's spinning attack and slashed in a quick, precise arc. Her blade sliced cleanly through the assassin's arm, sending it flying through the air. The assassin didn't even scream. He just laughed, high and broken, as if he felt nothing. "Get back," Elysia shouted, turning her head toward the students who had gathered nearby. Her voice was filled with urgency and warning. "This guy, he is not normal." She wasn't exaggerating. And assassins weren't acting like trained killers anymore. He looked like he had lost his minds. Whatever they had taken or been given, it had turned them into monsters. Jean stepped forward. Though he is a swordsman, he didn't use swords to protect the remaining students on the ground. "Stay behind us," he growled, his eyes never leaving the mad assassins. "We'll hold them off." And the battle raged on. Edwin's eyes widened. The assassins from last time? Or is it a new assassin? Riku, breathing heavily, lowered his sword. What the hell is going on? For a moment, all thoughts of their fight vanished. The two young swordsmen looked at each other, then at the breach. The battle wasn't over, but had just changed. So, the sound was not from a skill from Riku. "Let's settle this later," Edwin said, his voice serious. Riku blinked, still trying to process what he was seeing. Oh yeah, right." But his voice was distracted. His chest rose and fell quickly as he took in the sight of Elysia and Jean fighting the monstrous assassins. Sweat trickled down the side of his face from shock. His sword lowered slowly. "So, these are the people I've been underestimating." He clenched his teeth as he watched Jean leap forward, striking the assassin so hard that the ground cracked beneath the impact. Elysia, precise and graceful, flowed between strikes like a river made of steel, slicing through the air and parrying a flurry of mad slashes. Riku swallowed hard. They're on another level. That girl, Elysia, and him too, Jean. I thought I was catching up, but I'm nowhere near that. He tried to take a step forward, but winced. His leg buckled slightly under his weight. His body was already near its limit from his fight with Edwin. Cuts on his arms, bruises across his chest, and aching bones. All he could do now was watch. "I'm too injured," he muttered bitterly to himself. "Ugh, useless." He gripped his sword tightly, frustration welling up in his chest. "I'll train harder," he said silently. The students were too stunned to move. Some had witnessed Rampage for the first time. Edwin now entered the ground. "You have come, Edwin," Elysia said. "Edwin, hell yeah." Jean Halden. Through the thick smoke and chaos, they stood out clearly. At the center was Edwin. His uniform was ripped, but he stood tall. Beside him was Elysia, breathing hard. Blood ran down her arm, her grip on her sword tight. On the left side was Jean, breathing heavily. And then there was the assassin. He crouched low like a beast, snarling, his body radiating dark, boiling energy. Suddenly, he sprang forward like a missile. "Get back," Jean shouted from the side. Jean leapt into the way, not to fight but to shield the others. He used his body like a wall, pushing students away from the danger. "Move! Head to the dorms now," he yelled. Some students hesitated, stunned by fear. But Jin's sharp eyes told them he wasn't asking. He was commanding. "I said go." That finally made them run. Some bolted immediately. Others stumbled or looked back in fear. But eventually, they all escaped. Now, only Edwin and Elysia were left on the battlefield. The assassin growled and charged again. Edwin stepped in, raising his sword. The impact of his blade meeting the assassin's weapon rang out with a sharp, screeching sound. "I'll hold him," Edwin shouted, but Elysia stepped beside him, her tone steady despite her wounds. "No, we'll finish this. Together." The assassin rushed them again, moving unpredictably, like a rabid animal. His attacks were fast and wild. Elysia ducked under one slash, then slid her sword upward, cutting across his ribs. Black, oily blood splattered from the wound, staining her cheek. But he didn't even flinch. Edwin reacted next, delivering a powerful kick to the assassin's chest, knocking him backward across the field. "Switch," Elysia called. They moved with perfect coordination, like they had trained together for years. One defended while the other attacked. Then they switched again, over and over. The rhythm of their fight was like a dance under pressure. But no matter how many times they struck, the assassin wouldn't fall. From behind a pillar at the edge of the battlefield, Riku watched in silence. His eyes were wide with fear. He had seen the assassin first. He had understood the danger first. But now, he couldn't move. "Why can't I move?" he whispered. He clenched his fists. Fear wrapped around him like iron chains. It made him hate himself. Back on the field, Edwin narrowly dodged another attack. Elysia stepped in and drove her sword deep into the assassin's thigh. The bee screamed in pain and dropped to one knee. "Now!" Edwin shouted. Alicia's eyes began to glow. She summoned the last of her strength. With a cry, she leapt into the air, sword reversed in her grip. Edwin followed, close behind. Shining, their blades slashed down in an X shape, cutting through the assassin's chest in one final, perfect strike. The assassin gasped. His body trembled. The red light in his eyes slowly faded away. And then, he fell. Silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. Edwin dropped to one knee, coughing hard. Elysia leaned on her sword, breathing heavily. Her whole body shook. "We did it," she whispered. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Jean had returned. His face was covered in sweat. "The students are safe. Are you too?" "We handled it," Edwin replied, though he winced from the pain. Elysia looked up at the sky. What was he? Jin's face turned grim. That wasn't a normal assassin. That thing was something unnatural. They had faced death and survived. But behind the pillar, Riku stood frozen, still haunted by his own inaction. "What did I just witness?" he muttered. Then suddenly there was a daughter. "Ha ha ha,"